Sarah, I count 6, but we're still not at 6 o'clock, so we'll hold.
Yep, we are live on YouTube whenever you are ready here.
Oh.
Welcome, Sarah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm here.
Great. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you.
Love the background. It's very peaceful.
Yeah, I thought so. Moment of Zen.
Yeah, we could use that. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I think I'll give this another minute or so because I'm sure we'll have folks zipping in here. Okay, good. Okay. So we have quorum. I think we should get started, and I'm sure other folks will join us here in just a bit. And so with that, I would like to call the meeting of the Lafayette General Plan Advisory Committee to order for its February 15th meeting. And individuals can access this on the city's YouTube site and also on Zoom on this platform. And we encourage all to dial in. With that, Sarah, can you call the roll, please?
Renata.
I'm happy to. Oh, and
Thanks, Renata.
I think Carol is joining momentarily. Okay. Namratha Kaslanati is absent. Don Jenkins. I see a hand wave. Stella Weatherspoon.
Present.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Pease.
Here.
Beth Needle. I see Beth here. Jim Cervantes.
Here.
Susie Kelly.
Here.
Christine Rasmussen.
Present.
Thank you. Chris Lee.
Here.
And Carol Singer.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Anna Radnich.
Present.
Thank you. And Mayor Geringer.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And our next topic is the agenda adoption. I would like to make a couple of adjustments to for the order flow. And so let me just sketch them out, and then I'll ask for a motion to that effect. The first is item 9A, Happy Valley, Acalanes Valley Representative. I would like to move that up right after the consent calendar, after item 5. And I'd like to take item 10A, which is the City Council review of BART TOD and so on, move that up to really just before item 7B. My feeling is we're going to talk about BART there. I kind of figure that's a more natural segue. So to recap then, 9A moves up to right after 5, and then 10A moves up to just before 7B. So that would be my suggestion. Everything else stays the same. So if I could ask for a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
Well, I heard a couple. I think that was Stella.
Yep.
I'll take it. Thank you very much. And Sarah Renata, could you just call? This is a motion. I think we're changing things. I think we should just do a roll call vote on this.
One moment, please. Okay. Carol Singer,
Yes.
Martha Castellanati is absent. Don Jenkins,
Yes.
Stella Weatherspoon,
Yes.
Matt Pease,
Yes.
Beth Needle,
Yes.
Jim Cervantes,
Yes.
Susie Kelly,
Yes.
Christine Rasmussen,
Yes.
and Chris Lee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. Next topic is public comment. This is for comment from the members of the public for anything not on the agenda. And I do want to note that in our packet, we received a number of emails, which we've all gone through. Just to highlight, I saw about 5 or 6 relating to people advocating for no development on the BART site or on the Deer Hill corridor. Another for just no increases in density and also no development on the BART site. One related to the mission statement on the parks topic. About 8 I saw on the timeline and schedule, which we'll talk about later on, but basically advocating to push the timeline back. And then there was a cluster, about a half dozen, in the packet from Mike Kim, relating back to individuals in Happy Valley, discussion relating to BART and the Deer Hill corridor. So I just want to note that we did receive them. There was a couple that came in today. I saw one very detailed one from Colin Elliott that we may well take up at the next meeting. I might want to put that on the agenda. And I see a hand up, so maybe Susie, I'll go with that, and then we'll go to the public for any other comment.
Yeah, I just had a question. I want to make sure I do it in the right place, but I had a report. So if you wanted me to wait after public comment, I can do that. I just want to make sure that I represent all the people I talk to.
Sure thing. I've got commissioner activity reports coming up in just a bit.
Okay, great.
Perfect. That'd be perfect. Thank you. Any questions on that part? So I think what I'll do is I'll open it to any comment for the public. Again, these are for topics that are not on today's agenda. So Sarah, Renata, are there any hands up from the members of the public?
So if you would like to make a public comment on an item not on the agenda, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. Then in that case, next item will be consent calendar. We don't have anything there. So we will then take up the moved up item, which is item 9A under housekeeping. And I'm doing that as you know, I'm quite sure because it was in the package and I'm sure you saw it elsewhere, that our representative from Happy Valley, Acalanes Valley, Mike Kim, resigned. I talked to Mike. It's a loss for all of us because Mike brought a great perspective. He was really helpful in the presentation that he made at our last session. He said he would be a resource if we needed it, and we may want to tap him for that. But I do personally want to thank him for his service on the GPAC over the last year and some, and just send a note of appreciation to him for the commitment he made to the community. I do want to say, though, we're very fortunate in that the alternate for Happy Valley, Acalanes Valley, Sarah Blumenfeld, has said she would step up to take on the role. And we at the GPAC are most appreciative. And to make it all official, we have a special guest for this part of the evening, our excellent city clerk, Joanne Robbins, who will administer the oath of office to Sarah so she can then vote on anything that comes up, which is why we moved this topic up to the beginning. And so with that, I will defer to our city clerk to manage this part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantes, and welcome, Sarah Blumenfeld.
Thank you.
I can do this in two ways, but it's really nice if you would repeat the oath after me, and I'll give it to you in very small bites so that it's easy to do.
Sure.
So I, Sarah Blumenfeld, do solemnly swear that I will,
Go ahead.
well, this one isn't that hard. No. I, Sarah Blumenfeld, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
I, Sarah Blumenfeld, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Welcome to the General Plan Committee.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
I will, I think Sarah sent you this form via email. And if you will assign it and just send it back to me in an email, I
Okay,
will keep it for city files, and we appreciate your participation.
thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Joanne. It's very much appreciated and super.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. And I see one hand up, but I just do want to say that when we took this oath in November of 2020, embarking on the general plan effort, honestly, it gave me a chill down my spine to say those words, and it does again. Because when you think about it, we're a volunteer committee of just general citizens. We're not elected, but yet we're sort of taking the oath, which is substantively very similar, if not with some differences, to what the oath that the President of the United States takes, our governor, senators, council members. And it just goes to say that the work we're doing is very meaningful. And from what I've seen over the last year and a half, people have put their all in this. I think we've taken that oath very seriously. And so, Sarah, thank you so much. I sincerely mean it, for joining us. Your input, counsel, wisdom, criticism will be all very welcome in this effort going forward. So thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I see one hand raised from Carol. Is that on this topic, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, please.
I'd just like to say welcome to Sarah, and we certainly look forward to working with her. And I would like to ask Sarah if we could have a new roster, because not only do we have Sarah, we have a number of changes of different emails and different representatives, and be appreciated. Our roster is getting kind of old. Could we have a new one, Sarah?
You certainly can.
Thank you for everybody.
Sarah Blumenfeld, that's Sarah Allen. We're asking that of you. We're not dumping this one on you just yet. So unless there's anything else, let me look to staff here. I didn't ask for any public comment on this. I don't know. Are we obligated to do that for this, or we can do so?
I don't think Greg's nodding his head yes. Okay, we can open the public comment.
Okay, well, in that vein,
Good answer.
thank you. I had an inkling that might be the case. So with that, I would like to open the floor to any members of the public who would like to comment on this, what we've just discussed here, gone through with the swearing in of our new representative from Happy Valley, Acalanes Valley. So with that, Sarah or Renata, are there any hands raised?
If you would like to make a comment on this item, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or *9 if you're calling in. I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Next topic is commissioner activity reports. And I think that Susie had one. So really this is just relating, keeping the group up to speed with conversations, discussion we're having. So Susie, please, you got the floor. And then Matt, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I spoke up. And I'll try to keep it very brief. With this beautiful weather, I've been walking around a lot, and I went from one end of town to the next and popped in to see different neighborhoods, and got a lot of interesting feedback. This is feedback, not necessarily my opinion, although I share a lot of the views. So most of the residents are in agreement about the proposed opportunity sites. Some suggested it will create a stronger customer base for their businesses, so I was really happy to hear that. They're not opposed to the growth, but they are concerned about the rush to build in unrealistic buffers while ignoring major issues. The site should be spread out from east to west. Everybody felt that, and not just a land grab in the closest neighborhoods, causing a burden for the single family areas who like their dynamic. They live downtown because of the convenience, and they'd like to keep it that way without being overwhelmed by too many buildings coming in. The concern of parking, traffic, also a recent concern, sewers, noise, the wind and sun and the trees that are really changing in the neighborhoods due to the building. We just had a sewer breakout on our street because of excessive building, and these aren't things that are always considered. There is serious concern also about the lack of transparency from the state about usage in the opportunity sites. I know at this time, they're not really able to tell us how many sites will go on there or how many houses will go on there. But there's the concern is the upzoning and the building allowances that could happen. So they're saying yes to a site, and then what will really happen in the future. The state's focus on low income, but no acknowledgement of wraparound services and what that what pertains to that. And then this should not be imposed by the state, but it should be a local decision is what they feel. And then lastly, the accident the other day yesterday in front of Trader Joe's caused serious delays. And the whole neighborhood was talking about that because everybody was cutting through the neighborhoods. And they're like, if that's one accident, what's going to happen if you put 2,400 more cars on this road and the congestion that will come for that? So the outcome is they feel that there should be more time and community involvement. It was shocking that nobody knew what GPAC was or that these meetings were being held. And I tried to get that information to them, and I'll try to do a better job of getting out there and making sure, but I was really surprised that walking from one end of town to almost the other end, nobody knew about it. So I will try to, make sure that they do know, but this was the feedback from them, and they really like the character of the downtown, and they do welcome more, but they just want to see a little bit more planning going into it before it's just a yes, build here. So that's the feedback that I got.
Thank you very much. I've got another hand up from Matt and then Stella.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I had to make a presentation. I made a presentation to the Government Affairs Subcommittee of the Chamber of Commerce to give them an update on where we were with the housing element discussion. I've given them several briefings as we've moved through this process over the last year. They want to weigh in on their thoughts, and they've called a special session of the Chamber Board of Directors for February 22nd, where we're hoping to come up with a recommendation that we will forward on to GPAC and the City Council shortly after that, and have that available, well before we have to make our final recommendations. So that's it.
Great. Thank you very much. Stella and then Carol.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I met with Colin Elliott last week to discuss some of the points he made in the email public comment that he sent in.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And Carol?
I'm not sure if this was the same meeting, but there were a number of us who met with Colin Elliott and Susan Candell to discuss GPAC, the timeline for GPAC. it was myself, Christine Rasmussen, Don Jenkins. That 4 as well, one more, Chris.
And me.
Chris.
And well, just to add on to Carol's description, I think one of the valuable parts of that meeting was that we looked at alternative sites that were not, well, we haven't finished our opportunity site review, with the idea that developing smaller sites might be to an advantage. Also, looking at the yield from setting from zoning, what the true yield is, and that number may be useful in order to satisfy whatever buffer we come up with. And that was a valuable piece of information that I came away with.
Okay, great.
Hey, Jim, what is the Brown Act limit to the number of people being together?
We can't have a quorum, is my understanding. We're going to touch on Brown Act later, but
Okay.
question might be a good one. The one thing that folks need to be mindful of is like, for example, when we did the mission statement committee, it was only 3. We did not have a quorum. And so we just need to be mindful of not having a quorum in a meeting. So that's just a heads up. Sounds like it was a good productive
Chris,
session.
how many people were there, Chris, from the GPAC?
There were 5, and I think we were all being mindful of that. And because it was without Mike or Sarah for that period of time, it was even 5 out of 10. So not a majority. And if we need to have that reviewed, I think everybody would want that.
Yeah, I think
we don't want to do anything,
Yeah, we're going to talk about Brown Act requirements later, so maybe
we can defer.
Yeah, let's because this come up in a couple other instances, and when you're in the civilian world, you just have a meeting. It's different when it's a public agency, so so let's bracket this one. We'll just touch on that later. Just want to make sure there's no foot faults or people get have issues. Okay, that sounds like it was a good productive session. That is all to the good in the bigger realm of things. I think maybe I have one update for relating to the mission statement effort. Last night's council session, I sort of represented the subcommittee in presenting to the council the 2 options that we reworked based on council feedback from the prior session. The council moved to adopt the second option, which sort of looks like what we had with some changes in it. There's some additions from the council. And my understanding of this, and the mayor can correct me, is that it's sort of done in the way we would frame an ordinance, where this is like the first reading. There'll be a follow-on council session to formally adopt it. I think the idea the council had was to give time for people to sort of like look at it, think about it, make any last comments or changes before it goes final, which should be at the next council session. And Mayor Gehringer, I hope I got that right, because I have a thumbs up on that one. So we are close to the end line, if not quite there, in the marathon that's been the mission statement. So again, to the GPAC members, thank you all for your involvement in this, and I think it's gotten to us to a good outcome. Any other commissioner activity reports?
Inclusive Lafayette had a Zoom session last week. Hold on a minute. I'll tell you what the title was. It was called Learn How State Laws Help Lafayette Plan for Housing. And there were a couple of guest speakers. The main presenter was John Wizard, who is with Yimby Law. He's actually a city council member with the city of Seaside, and he'll be running for assembly person for that district. So he had, I didn't listen to everything. I didn't listen to the whole presentation, But he had some good information about YIMBY's involvement and also the history of housing in Seaside. And Seaside's a very different place from Lafayette. So it's got a lot of history. It's got ex-military, etc. But that's also changing. So housing, low and low income and very low income housing is very important. So that was interesting. And then Chris Mickus from Inclusive Lafayette also spoke. So as I said, I was not able to listen to the whole presentation, but I found it to be interesting, and it was recorded.
Okay.
And I'm sure Inclusive Lafayette can give you a copy if you're interested.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Chris. Any other commissioner activity items? Okay. Sarah Ellen, just to check, I don't think we need public comment on this, or is that? I want to make sure I don't have a foot fault with the rules either. So.
No, I think we're good here.
Okay, great. So then we're going to move into the more substantive part of our session, starting off with a discussion about CEQA, and we will then move into a discussion about the housing element site inventory. And just to help frame that, I think a big part of that issue with respect to the site inventory is the schedule we've been talking about. So and that was in the staff report. I'd like to sort of like talk it through when we get to the site inventory part, because I think that sort of meshes better. With respect to CEQA, in this point, I think we all received a document in our packet, which was CEQA 101, and we thought it'd be appropriate to have staff walk us through that, because as I understand it, tomorrow, the draft EIR, for the draft programmatic EIR that the council approved back in April, will go up on the system, so to speak. So it'll be available, and there'll be a chance for different bodies to sort of review that. The idea here was to give us, as sort of novices to all this, kind of a bigger picture review of like maybe the things, what is CEQA, what is an EIR, what should we look for, so we can kind of get more up to speed when we sort of get our hands on the document. I think I prefaced that adequately, Sarah, Renata, or Diana, but why don't I turn it to you to sort of walk us through this, and then we'll have questions from the group, from our committee rather. I'll ask for public comment. We'll bring it back for any other discussion, and then we'll move on to the sites inventory discussion. So I'll leave it to staff to take it away, please.
And then for the record, I would just like to note that Namratha is present.
Thank you.
It's going on the city website tomorrow.
City website and the Office of Planning and Research, OPR's website, which is the required portal for the CEQA document. Okay, and I also, let's see here, let me share my screen and we'll get started. And I know, so I just want to mention that Anna Radinich does this in her daily life, so please jump in where I fail. And then also Luke Evans is on the environmental consulting team, and Greg is here with us as well to all assist. Okay, so we'll go through here. Everyone can see? Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to go over the housing element timeline. We'll do a CEQA overview. We'll also talk through the steps in the environmental review process. It's sort of its own process in and of itself. We'll talk about what you'll find in the environmental impact report, the contents of it, not the findings this evening, but the contents, and then also how this body will be expected to use that document. So you've seen this before. This is the housing element timeline, which gives the layers of differing reviewing bodies. So we have GPAC in green, Planning Commission in yellow, City Council in blue. We have our affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements and timeline, and then also we have our CEQA timeline. So we are here starting our draft EIR review period, which is a 45-day public review period. I also wanted to bring it to your attention that the reason for this timeline is that we have 2 90-day review periods for HCD. So our first draft to HCD is required to be submitted June 1st. They have 90 days to review what we've submitted and provide any comments. Once we receive those comments back, then we have approximately a month to make revisions, bring it back to the Planning Commission and City Council, and then resubmit to HCD. So then they have another 90 days to do that same process. And then our final adoption to HCD is at the end of January 2023. So that's sort of why the timeline is as it is. So this is the GPEX timeline regarding sites inventory, which, as we've discussed before, this is section 3 of the housing element, which we've organized into 3 sections. So home stretch. So meeting 1 was last week, last meeting, which was February 1st. At that time, we agreed to focus on the sites with low or medium analysis required, sites that we think that are will be easily accepted by HCD. Together, we also discussing the 4 large sites at this meeting, which we will do. And also there were 2 additional orange sites that were described or requested for further discussion, which have been added to the Opportunity Sites workbook. Meeting number 2 is this meeting. So we will introduce the concepts for the environmental impact report in CEQA. We will also discuss those 4 sites as well as the 2 orange sites. We're not asking for any action tonight. This is sort of informational and discussion oriented. Meeting 3 will review the yellow sites and also the buffer. And then we've added a meeting based on public comments and direction from the GPAC chair. And that meeting will be sort of finalizing and making a recommendation to Planning Commission. Again, with this schedule, because of our requirements for submission to HCD. So before I get into the CEQA items, I just wanted to introduce Environmental Science Associates. This is the consulting team working on the CEQA document. And as I mentioned, Luke Evans is here with us this evening. Hillary Gittleman is also on the team, and also Jillian Fake Miney. And Luke, you can tell me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. In terms of CEQA's objectives, or actually, let me just take a step back. We throw CEQA around a lot, but really it's an acronym, and it stands for the California Environmental Quality Act. And really it's meant to help understand potential environmental impacts of a given project. It's meant to help avoid, reduce, or prevent environmental damage. It is an informational document, so it is not an approval document. It's something that you can use in your decision-making process, but it itself is not a decision. It is not an approval document. It also ensures that legal compliance. So it is not feasible to pursue an alternative project that does not meet the legal requirements, including the reallocation.
Sarah, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Could you explain what that last bullet point means? You lost me on that one.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into it in a little bit in terms of what an alternative is. I think it'll make more sense, but I'm happy to circle back if it.
No, I'll defer.
Okay. So inside an environmental impact report, which we also use the acronym EIR, you'll find a summary, you'll find a project description. This is something we took the Planning Commission during our scoping meeting. You'll find the setting, what are sort of our baseline setting. You'll find what the impacts are, what the significant impacts are, any mitigation measures or things that we can use to reduce those impacts. You'll find project alternatives, and then also cumulative impacts. So that is as projects come forward, the cumulative impacts of those projects. You'll also find very specific topics covered and analysis in each one of these categories. So we're looking at aesthetics, air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, energy, geology, greenhouse gas emissions, hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, noise, population and housing, public services and recreation, transportation, tribal cultural resources, utilities and service systems, and wildfire. So all of those topics are evaluated, and there are sort of thresholds, which are considered above which are considered significant and below which are considered less than significant. So thinking a little bit about what a program EIR is versus a project EIR. So a program EIR is very broad. It's evaluation at a higher level. It makes a lot of assumptions because we don't know the specifics of a project at the, while we're evaluating at this high level. And it evaluates sort of a maximum scenario. And I think we've described this to you before as an umbrella. So it's sort of this maximum scenario, and then any sort of decisions we make underneath that umbrella will be consistent with and will have less than that impact, than the maximum scenario impact. A project level EIR is actually used for discrete development proposals. So that's for a project, one particular project on a particular site. So that is a building, or not so much a plan or a general plan as we're doing now. In terms of the language, the nomenclature, so a draft EIR is actually the analysis and conclusions associated with that analysis. It's ready for public review. So we call it a draft. The state calls it a draft, but that contains all of the actual analysis. What's termed the final EIR is actually a response to public comments received during that 45-day review period. So what you really want to look at is the draft EIR, which has all the analysis and information. The final EIR is really a response to comments received. So in terms of the process for CEQA, so the notice of preparation is, well, first we did a scoping meeting with the Planning Commission to identify, what is the scope of the project, and it was a public hearing process to allow any members of the public to identify if there should be other things that should be evaluated. So that was completed with Planning Commission, and then and had a 30-day review period that was between August 2nd and September 2nd. So now we are at the point of the draft EIR. So we established the scope and then did the evaluation, and then we're ready for publication and review of the draft EIR. And then after the draft EIR, well, there's a 45-day period, and then responses to comments will dictate the final EIR. And then it will be certification at the city council level. So what this looks like in terms of the steps for our particular project. So the scoping happened August to September at the Planning Commission. The analysis happened between September and now, and the draft EIR is ready to be published and will be officially circulated starting on Friday. The public comment period lasts for 45 days. So actually, I think this is actually April 4th. Apologies for that. And the final EIR will be reviewed at the City Council. As a reminder, the study areas are the physical boundaries that were included in the evaluation. City Council review and approve these study areas in April. You'll notice that there are 3 areas that are removed from review, and those are areas 10, 11, and 12. And Council decided to not include those in the scope. There is an interactive map that's available on the city's website or the general plan website with the link here. So the schedule for CEQA and the housing element. So today is our first sort of introductory concept meeting. The official publication and circulation date will be Friday the 18th. So that's when the public comment period begins. On Tuesday, the 22nd is a regular Planning Commission meeting. So we will add that to the agenda as a summary, as an informational item to say, hey, it's ready and available, just making sure that the public and the Planning Commission know about it. On Monday, the 28th, we will have a special joint session with the City Council, Planning Commission, and GPAC to discuss the findings and very specifically what came out of that analysis. In March, the very next day, we'll have our 3rd GPAC meeting on op sites to talk about those op sites in light of the draft EIR. Then there's a City Planning Commission meeting on the 7th, which will be the official meeting to take public comment. Any written public comment received in that 45-day period will be responded to as part of the final EIR, but this is the official meeting to sort of discuss and gather the public comments. On Tuesday, the 15th of March, GPAC will have its 4th meeting, and ultimately we'll be voting on the opportunity sites. And then, as I mentioned, the April 4th is the draft EIR public comment period ending. So in terms of outcomes for the draft EIR, there are several levels of impact. So something could have no impact. So this is, for instance, talking about aesthetics or air quality. That something could have no impact, less than significant impact, less than significant if it's mitigated, and also significant and unavoidable, meaning there aren't mitigations for that impact. Significant and unavoidable means it will cause a substantial adverse change in the physical environment, and it cannot be avoided, even with the implementation of recommended mitigation. So the project could still proceed even if that finding is made, but the council would need to make a statement of overriding considerations to say, you know, this is so important, or this is required and we must do this. So GPAC should be using the draft EIR as an informational document just to understand the impacts of the project and its alternatives. It will be used in concert with public comment, with the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements and other statutory requirements, and in concert with existing policy guidance from existing city documents. The draft, and then the final EIR is, again, just incorporates the comments received from the draft EIR public review period. And so this evening, we're just asking you to ask us questions. We have a CEQA consultant, as I mentioned, Luke Evans, here to provide any additional background information that you might need. And then we're looking forward to our next steps, which is reviewing the actual document itself, and then the joint meeting where we'll discuss the findings. With that, I'll just ask Greg or Luke or Anna if I have missed anything.
No, you did a great job, Sarah. For a non-SEPA person, you should go into consulting, but I'm not going to say that in front of Greg.
So thank you, Sarah, very much for that. I guess sometimes you could say CEQA is a bit like the dark arts, and you could be our professor in that, I think. I'm going to, a couple of things. One of which is I got my notes wrong, so my apologies. I had a note to myself about doing the scheduling topic on the next item. Is really this one, so my bad. And what we'll do here is the idea is to ask questions or get clarifications from Sarah, staff, the consultant. Once we do that, we'll open it up for public comment, questions, observations. Then we'll bring it back to our group to kind of have more of a discussion. For my part, for example, I do want to discuss the schedule, but that's not really as a clarification or comment, so I'm going to hold on that. So I think we'll really focus on here, questions, clarifications with respect to what has been presented here. And I see 3 hands up so far. I've got Chris, then Carol, then Matt. So with that, I will turn the floor to Chris, to you.
Hi, Luke. I have a question about high fire zones. This is a big area of concern for neighborhoods, especially the Ocolanus Deer Hill Road corridor. So given the assignment of risk or assignment of mitigation, if you have an area that is designated high fire zone, or that you will say that it is, what kinds of mitigation could be done to allow housing to be built nearby?
Well, I think there's some differences of opinion on that, to be perfectly honest. But there are a great many regulations that are out there that are prescribed by CAL FIRE, for instance, by county fire service districts, the city's own fire service operation, and building codes and all these other things that are intended to protect homes and to keep the risk down for areas within high fire hazard zones. There are specific requirements that a structure, if it was proposed, would have to meet if it were to be located in one of these zones. So as far as mitigations go, at this point, there really is a fair amount of regulatory requirements and also best practices associated with constructing in these zones. Now, as things move forward in the fire environment, and as we all know, things are ramping up, and there's definitely a perception of greater risk. Those requirements may change. I expect they will. But for the most part, the mitigations that we would be looking at are really relying on what is already required in those zones to construct in those zones. But this would be certainly a point that we would like to hear from the public on, if they have specific ideas for mitigations or specific requirements they think should be prescribed in these areas within the city. That would be useful information to have.
Would you go so far as to say another road should be built or a certain road should be widened so that more traffic can use it in the event of an emergency?
You know, part of the challenge with this particular type of project is that it is very broad programmatic level, and we don't have specific projects that we can look at and say, okay, this housing development is going to have problems with access to the east or the west or this or that, and therefore they should do X to fix that problem. We don't have that information available to us, so a fair amount of this is going to have, as projects come forward, if they do, a fair amount of this is going to have to be looked at that time. But at a minimum, all these projects would have to abide by what is already required, which is pretty substantial. So some of the things you're talking about certainly would be on the table if a project were to come up, I would think.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I've got Matt and then Stella and then Beth.
Hey, thanks, Jim. First off, to Sarah Allen, the question I had on that slide towards the front, I guess I still didn't understand what that meant, and maybe you could give me a little bit more detail on it, please.
Sure. So within the EIR, there's the project that was studied, project area, and then an alternative to that. So we kind of colloquially call it the downtown only alternative. And then there are two other alternatives. One is a no project alternative, meaning what happens if we don't do anything. And that actually is an alternative that is not legally feasible because we have to do the RENA allocation. So okay, that's what I meant.
So basically, just to paraphrase this, make sure I understand it right, you're basically saying we have to do the RENA allocation. That has to be the plan.
That is the law, yes.
Okay, thank you, that helps. And I guess maybe this question is to Luke. We only have a limited time compared to the Planning Commission and the City Council to study the EIR. And is there anything in there that you can make us aware of that is going to be significant in terms of how we're making our decision? You know, we've been talking about sites all year. We've done workshops, things like that. We've gotten lots of feedback about different areas. Is there something that's going to be, I almost want to call it this black swan that's going to come out of this that is going to dramatically change how we have to think about this?
We were conservative in our findings on a number of topics. And hopefully Greg will be okay with me sharing some of those with you. Usually I'm reluctant to share findings before something's actually released, but I mean, it's already a done deal. We're ready to send this thing to the printer. One of the findings we found that may give you pause and make you think about where sites should be located, et cetera, is we found that the impact of the project on aesthetics and visual resources would be significant. We did that mainly because the densities that would be proposed, particularly in the downtown area, and then also, for instance, if the BART sites were rezoned and they were to develop at 75 units per acre, clearly those are going to be some large structures. They're going to be tall. They're taller than anything you have in town now. Now, it doesn't mean that you couldn't build a nice, attractive building, which of course you would, but it does mean that things would change substantially from what's there currently. Now, that in and of itself isn't always a significant impact. I mean, to be fair, a lot of this is subjective. What's beautiful to me may not be beautiful to somebody else. But our finding, just to be conservative, we said, if you're going to put a building up in downtown that's going to be X number of stories when you've only got 2- and 3-story buildings there now, a lot of people are going to view that as adverse.
Sure.
So that was one finding we had, that I think it was an honest finding, and we didn't try to sugarcoat, didn't try to explain it away. We just said this is what it is. The other thing we found was there could be, for large projects, for these to be quite large projects, if there were some very large projects that were proposed and developed, there could be significant air quality impacts just because of the size of the projects. I don't think that would have a bearing on small projects, but it could on larger ones. Another one we found was for cultural resources, specifically historic buildings. I don't think anybody is proposing to go out and tear down historic buildings, but it's possible that as part of the development of some of these sites, there could be historic age buildings on them. And for the most part, once you tear down an historic age building, you've lost it, and that's a significant impact. So in an abundance of caution, we said, we can't predict, we can't guarantee that there would be no impacts to historic buildings as part of this. There could be. So therefore, we found that to be significant and unavoidable too. Of course, as projects get proposed, that would be up to the city and the council to decide if it's worth it to do that. Greg is raising his hand, so.
Well, I think those are really good examples, Luke, and thank you for sharing them. I think high level, I don't believe there's going to be anything shocking that comes out of the EIR. I think our policy for this and all projects is to be very conservative, whether it's financial budgeting or environmental impacts. Across the board, we are very conservative in our approaches. And so, there is a summary in the document of those where the analysis has found the impacts to be potentially significant and unavoidable. And so, mitigations are proposed to lessen potential impacts to lessen significant, and also to lessen the impact, even if they would remain significant and unavoidable. But we've approached it very conservatively. I don't think there's any surprises in it. There's a summary in the document, and the alternatives portion is a requirement of CEQA. And so the project must be described. What project is being analyzed in the EIR? And we actually have 2 projects, those 2 scenarios adopted by the council. There are goals associated with that project. What does the project want to or need to accomplish? And then the alternatives look at, are there alternatives which would be have fewer or lesser environmental impacts and still meet those goals. And there's always a no project alternative, particularly when there's a development application. What if we do nothing? And so those are kind of statutory requirements, but that's how the structure of CEQA and an EIR is laid out. Hope that helps.
It does. Thank you, both of you. Appreciate it.
Okay. I've got Stella, then Beth, and Christine.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Luke Evans. I know you just described the relationship or the work that you did with the very high fire hazard severity zones. And I know I've seen that CAL FIRE is working on new maps, and their website said that they would be producing them in late 2020 or 2021. And so I'm just wondering, as a professional working regularly with that data, have you heard of any new maps coming? And if so, is that something that's pertinent with respect to this particular EIR cycle?
I am not aware of any maps immediately forthcoming. I'm sure you all have seen the map of Lafayette, basically everything north of the freeway. Not everything, but most of it, and a little bit dipping down into the west side of town. I don't think any of those are going to go away. I don't think any of these zones are going to shrink. If anything, they're going to get larger. I am not aware of any pending change. For our purposes, if they were to roll out new maps tomorrow, we would still continue with the information that we have, that we've prepared the EIR under. That was our baseline. So that's the way we would move forward with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I've got Beth and then Christine.
Hi, thanks. Luke, this is for you. So in looking, when you're preparing an EIR and you're working on CEQA, there are a number of different agencies that have input into how you determine what's buildable, where you're going to impact whip snakes, wildflowers, creeks. So is there a hierarchy of agencies that you defer to in creating these?
Well, there's certainly agencies that have areas of expertise. I mean, you mentioned wildlife and sensitive plants, things like that. California Department of Fish and Wildlife would be the agency that we always consult with to get their list of species that they know occur in a project area. And then from that list, which is a big, long list, we would go out in the field and look and see if there is in fact suitable habitat for those creatures, and then we make a determination on whether or not the project could actually impact those creatures, and if there's mitigations or regulatory procedures we'd have to follow if that were the case. So that's one example. For biological resources. For cultural resources, we talk with the tribes and we get their input. We actually didn't get any feedback from tribes on this. Actually, we did. One tribe responded and said that they had no concerns about the housing element update. But then we also do record searches and find out what kind of cultural resources are known to be out there that have already been looked at in other surveys or other work that's been done over the last decades. And then we make a determination on sensitivity based on that. So those are some examples. I mean, do you have any other particular topics that you're interested in?
No, I mean, I was on a project that was held up for 10 years by a whip snake. So I know there's anything that could happen at any time.
Yes.
To stop construction, to stop building, or to change the dynamic or the area that you're going to build in. I just want to know, which agencies you defer to, I guess, and if there's any impact to the creeks and wildlife in Lafayette.
That would be Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and CDFW, and all. And, the thing about this project is most of the sites that you're looking at are already developed. So there's very few raw land sites that would be impacted where those kind of resources might be present. There are a few, but not many.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, Christine.
Hi there. I had a couple questions. So can I go back to those fire maps that Stella was talking about? I know that any short-term changes to those maps wouldn't be impacting this EIR report. But what if it did come out and it was significant? Would that mean that we would do a whole new CEQA, or would we redo that portion in regards to the new fire maps? Or how does that work if we do get data back and it is changed significantly?
If for instance, CAL FIRE were to come out with new maps next week, and they were to differ substantially from what we've looked at, We would not necessarily be under any obligation to reanalyze the project based on that new information, because our baseline is from a while back. And we use whatever regulations and, in this particular case, whatever maps were available at the time of the analysis. CEQA does provide some level of certainty. Otherwise, you kind of have these moving targets where as new information comes out, you're always chasing something different and you never get finished. So in that situation, that would be the case. But, if the city were to really, what I always go back to is, it's got to pass a straight face test. If it were to turn out that the whole city is now in a red zone, then okay, that's something we need to really look at. That would be something that we would probably be advised to do. So it would really be a policy call on behalf of this, on part of the city, as to whether or not we'd want to go back and do that. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was just wondering, just a little bit more how, if it did need to happen, how it would happen. So that answers my question. And then another question I had was, so I missed a few of the things you said because my internet's not very good. But when we were talking about the fire areas and how the CEQA looks at that, we were talking about building materials for the buildings and how you could mitigate, loss of building structures and I guess life. But what about evacuations? Did you touch on that? I might have missed it. Is that something that is covered in the CEQA? Like, should, the area north of the BART parking lot have, a terrible fire? Are we going to be able to get people evacuated in a timely manner? So is that part of the CEQA, the evacuation during an emergency?
It is, but I would offer that it is very narrowly defined in CEQA at present. That may change based on the changing environment. But currently, the question we have to answer, I'll read it to you verbatim. Would the project substantially impair an adopted emergency response plan or emergency evacuation plan? So we would look at the city's adopted emergency evacuation routes, their plans, et cetera. And we would ask the question, would the project, if these projects were to be developed, would they impair that plan? And of course, by the time these projects are developed, there'll probably be several iterations of the plan. It's going to, it's an evolving thing. It doesn't stay the same. Every once in a while, it gets updated. And a lot of the reasons it does get updated is because conditions do change and new development comes in, traffic patterns change, whatever the case may be, and those things get looked at. When I say it's very narrowly defined, I would say that the question of would the project impair adoption of a plan, you'll notice that the threshold question is not, would the project disallow orderly evacuation or timely evacuation? That's not the question that's asked. The question that's asked is, would it impair the plan? And so there's some nuance there. And it doesn't always necessarily point to, it doesn't always provide the answer that I think people want. And the answer that you had, the question you had, was whether or not people will be able to evacuate in a timely fashion. That is a bit of a tough nut to crack at this point. As I said, this is an evolving issue. There's some court cases that just came out about this that are working their way through the courts. We'll see if they come up or not. I don't know if they get appealed. But this is an evolving issue, and we've analyzed it in the EIR within the context of what is currently practiced.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the GPAC? And I thought you had your hand up for a minute, but it's down.
Yeah, I was earlier. I was going to ask Luke to kind of go through the parameters for defining an alternative, but then Greg did it. So we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the group? I guess I've got a couple. So the first is, My understanding is, I think, well, so it's the official date for the public is Friday, the 18th. That's when the comment period starts. But my understanding, and Sarah Ellen, check me on this, is that it'll be in effect live tomorrow for those who want to sort of get a crack at this thing.
Right, it'll be up on the website and the Office of Planning and Research website. And we'll also send an email to GPAC with the link.
That would be very helpful. So, see, these are the preview tickets to the Broadway show, I guess, so folks can tap into that. The second question is, my understanding is that really the planning is the entity that the Planning Commission rather is the entity that will be reviewing the EIR, kind of looking at this in terms of its substance, its issues, and so on. It goes on to City Council. That's not a role we are taking as GPAC. So I want to be clear on what our role is here. It's really more for information with respect to how we look at opportunity sites. Do I have that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
City Council will be the final hearing body, but Planning Commission will be reviewing the contents of the EIR. You're using it as an information tool.
Yeah. So in layperson's terms, for me, my understanding would be we're not in the loop on this document in terms of like reviewing and commenting on it, although as citizens we can, and folks want to do it, that'd be great. But it's more like for us a resource when we look at the opportunity sites. That's the main thing. Okay. Got a couple more questions, but Carol, I see you got your hand up, so I'll defer to you.
Thank you. You mentioned the timeline. Sarah, could we have a copy of that slide that showed the, or could we, somehow I'd like to get a timeline that puts this all together. We have this timeline here of GPAC and the Planning Commission and City Council. I don't know if you want to put on there some of the other dates or just send us a slide you had.
I can send you the slides for sure. It's definitely gets a little complicated with so many dates and deadlines, but we'll do our best to give you all the information in a readable manner.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, Carol. And Stella, you've got your hand up. And I think Greg Wolf's got his hand up. Is that a clarification or something?
Well, to your question regarding the obligations of the Planning Commission, so CEQA kind of broadly is about providing information to decision makers and the public. And so it behooves us, or behooves the decision makers, to know what the environmental impacts would be of any given decision. And so that's kind of the nature of the informational document. And so it's informative to this group, it's informative to the public, it's informative to the staff and the decision makers, but there is a legal obligation to make sure that we've met the letter of the law in terms of CEQA and certifying the EIR, and that goes to the Planning Commission and sometimes the City Council. But that's the to certify the EIR is the Planning Commission's responsibility.
Thank you. Stella, you got your hand up.
I do. Yeah, sorry, Jim, to butt into your question time, but I had something that I wanted to ask Luke to give us an overview of. You know, most of our map areas cover our main corridor, Mount Diablo Boulevard, and we have our freeway on-ramps and off-ramps. So there's a lot of traffic at times. And I noticed in the staff report that you described some changes to CEQA law, which is the change from using level of service to vehicle miles traveled. And I wonder if you could maybe summarize that and help us understand that in the context of the map areas that we're tasked with finding housing for.
Sure. Yeah, that's been a huge change, and it's been slow to roll out, but it became officially required about 1.5 years ago. And in the old days, as some of you may know, level of service was a very highly technical modeling exercise where you would determine what was going to happen at the various intersections and roadway segments if you added the project's traffic and perhaps traffic from other projects that might be occurring simultaneously. And from that, you would make a determination on whether or not an intersection might be impacted in a way that didn't meet criteria. And therefore, you would prescribe usually some kind of an improvement. You would tell the applicant they've got to pay for an intersection or a signal or whatever it is, or they'd have to put funds into some kind of uniform fund that would be used toward those kind of improvements. So the VMT law, which passed a few years ago, basically said that is not what we're going to be doing anymore. We really need to focus on vehicle miles traveled. In other words, the total number of vehicles that are on the road and the number of miles that are traveled. It's not so much, and I will admit, it is confusing to lay people. It's even confusing to those of us who work in the industry. It's not so much a function of how many more miles are traveled because of the project. It's supposed to drive what type of projects you approve. For instance, with the types of projects that would be a part of the housing element update, let's say in the downtown area, the idea is that the typical vehicle miles traveled for a person living in that area would be less than somebody who lives out in the suburbs or out in a rural area, because they can take BART, maybe their job is nearby, they don't have to drive as far. And the idea is to get the numbers down, get the VMT per capita number down. That's the idea, because the thinking behind the law was that if you did that, then you would address a whole bunch of things. You would address traffic congestion, and you would address air quality emissions and greenhouse gas emissions and all those things. And that's what we really need to be working on, instead of building more roads and driving more cars. So that was the idea behind the law. And so this EIR follows that guidance, and it looks at vehicle miles traveled as the metric. It is now not allowed to make a CEQA determination based on level of service. It has to be looked at only through the lens of vehicle miles traveled at this point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions from our group? So then go back to one of mine. So it's a programmatic EIR, so it's not one of these site-specific project EIRs. And my recollection is we have these different scenarios that were examined. There's like a downtown early, there's a distributed, I forget what the third one was. So then, I recall, like from the council meeting, in setting the parameters for this, I guess maybe it was for the downtown scenario, we assumed 110 units per acre, or something like that. I mean, just sort of set a high upper bound for purposes of the work. So is that, if we're to say there was a world that existed where one of these scenarios was real, and then the EIR looks at that world as if the 2,100 units plus the buffer existed in that area, whether it was downtown only or distributed. My apologies for a rambling question, but I want to get a handle on how you looked at this, looking at RENA and its allocation to these different zones.
Greg, do you want me to answer that, or you want to take a crack, or how would you like to proceed?
Well, I'd like you to correct me if I get this wrong, but that is precisely what the EIR looked at, is those scenarios, and if they were built out, what the environmental impacts would be.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that the other thing that Sarah said that is an important reminder is that no one's advocating to upzone the downtown to 110, 115 units to the acre. That's the umbrella, and anything, if we understand the impacts of that, anything less than that would have a less of an impact on the environment. So I also want to add that the more sites that we can add to the inventory, by definition, the lower the density would have to be in order to accommodate RENA. So both scenarios were considerably larger than what, in terms of total number of units, than what ultimately we assume the city council will approve, in order to ensure that whatever impacts are within this umbrella that we have defined through the CEQA analysis.
Right. And then, not sure this is specific to the document, but you know, I had the impression we were like for our work focusing within the bounds of the programmatic EIR. So to the extent that there was a site that maybe was just outside that, my understanding is we really couldn't touch that. There are a few sites that are sort of outside that bounds, which could generate some units. What then? Does that mean a new EIR for those? Or if someone could clarify that, that would be helpful. Because I assume it would basically kind of off limits, and I was thinking maybe I'm not quite right on that.
Well, we had taken the direction from City Council to exclude certain planning areas, numbered planning areas, from the analysis in CEQA. The council is very direct about that. There will, however, be development outside of those areas because that's how it works. What we have to discern is how can we accommodate the RENA allocation within an area prescribed by the City Council in a couple of different ways, is so that we can demonstrate to the state that we have that capacity, when in fact development may occur in other locations anyway, regardless. We have something that we called scatter sites in the inventory worksheet or workbook, which includes things like single family houses and ADUs and a couple of developments here and there. We have pipeline projects, some of which are outside of the numbered areas. So we know that that'll happen outside, but the idea is if you were to load it all up in these locations, all those units, what would the environmental impact be? And the presumption is that in some ways, the more you spread it around, the fewer certain kinds of impacts will be, but others may increase, like VMT. The more you spread out the units throughout the community, the higher the VMT likely would go, because more people would be driving from the hinterlands, like on St. Mary's Road, to come downtown. So there are always going to be trade-offs between these different scenarios that or alternatives that we're looking at. The question ultimately will become what looks like the best one to meet all the objectives of accommodating the RENA allocation with presumably the fewest number of impacts or the least serious impacts or something like that.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, Greg, you got your hand up.
If a site is identified and the city wants to move forward with using that as an opportunity site and it's not within the study areas, some level of additional environmental review is going to be warranted. And if it's in the blue study areas and it's an adjacent site to that, and it essentially would have kind of the same impacts as the study area, that's a pretty simple analysis to do. If it is, purely a hypothetical, if the city somehow decided to pursue upzoning, our community park and using those public lands as high density housing, that's outside the study zone, but the impacts of that would be significantly different than an adjacent in the downtown already zoned. And so that would require a whole much more additional environmental review.
Thank you, Greg.
Bad example, Greg.
Okay.
I knew that would get a rise out of Carol. So thank you, Greg, for spicing up our evening. Those are the questions I had. Are there any other questions from our group? Because what I'll do then is, so the sequencing, we'll turn this over, inviting any public comment, questions, whatever on this. And so I know that there's a timer the city council has, and I don't know if that's helpful here. Maybe I'd like to let people roll, but or else if you can flag folks, that would be helpful. And then we'll bring it back to our group for discussion. I think there's really two pieces to this. One is the schedule and the other is the EIR. So so the way we'll do this is open it up for any comments, questions, issues from the public, vet all that, and then we'll bring it back to our group to wrap up this. And so with that, Sarah or Renata, can you see if we have anyone who raised their hand?
Yes. So if you would like to make a public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. First speaker is Grace Dixon, followed by Libby Henry. And this is my first time trying this timer, so bear with me. It is.
I'm ready when you are.
We'll see if it works. Grace, welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
There we go. It's working, so go for it.
Okay. Well, my theme of last night was I'll be brief. So I am interested in the timeline. So that's what this question pertains to. what is the plan for getting the word out to the public? Is there an interest to either having a table at the plaza or getting a written letter or postcard out so that the public does know, or will that happen? Is there a plan? I'm mostly commenting on the Susie Kelly. I do live on Monroe, which is very near downtown. And of course I know about all this, but I'm sure my neighbors do not. So in essence, that is my question.
Great. Grace, thank you so much. I do want us to talk about that a bit because it's important. And there is we have an extra meeting on the 15th, which I think will be really helpful to have public input on. And I think we could talk that through as a group here because that's an important area. We do want to make sure we have that covered. So Grace, thank you so much.
Okay.
And if it pleases the chair, I'd like to invite Grace Dixon to let her neighbors know about it. If she believes that they don't know about it, then please do let them know about it and invite them to participate.
Yeah.
How would I best do that?
Sure.
However you best engage with your neighbors. Some folks have a kind of an email list. Some folks, congregate and mention things in passing. I think it's up to each individual and how you relate best with your neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Our next, Libby Henry.
Libby's in the
Welcome.
Thank you, Jim, and thank everybody for all your hard work. And this is actually twofold relating to the timeline. I guess I'm not clear and a little shocked at the seemingly really accelerated timeline, particularly in regard to the housing element. I'm not understanding why there's a rush to get everything done in a month when you've been working on it for almost a year. And anyway, and it just seems like that's seemingly arbitrarily and not necessarily justified. So should that be mitigated? And my other point was in regard to CEQA, and this may be more of a planning commission sort of question, but going over, when Sarah was going over all the CEQA requirements and everything in the situations, it seems to me that if a project, if a developer presents a project and it violates and it has CEQA violations, why is it always the city that has to concede and have mitigations rather than the developer having to meet the CEQA requirements? They are California state laws. So I'm just wondering why it's always the city having to make concessions rather than the developers having to meet the requirements set by the state. Anyway, that's mainly my two concerns right now.
Okay. Thank you. And Libby, I think we'll touch on the schedule in a bit here. As far as the question goes, I don't know. I figure Greg Wolf might have an answer.
Happy to provide a quick response. It is common for developers to be obligated to implement those mitigation measures. I'll give an example. In a prior analyses, there was a finding of significance on air quality for the new residents there. They could be conditioned or required through mitigation to impose air filters. So it is commonplace for the developer to be on the hook for mitigations that their project would have on the environment.
Yeah, and I know that you're referring to the terraces and all of that. But again, using the terraces as an example, their mitigation for removing 103 established 100-year-old oak trees and how they contribute to improve our environment. They're replacing them with less than half of that saplings. I mean, the mitigation, there's absolutely no equality or rationalization there in, that I can see. I mean, you call it a mitigation, but it seems like a concession by us, by the cities.
Maybe I'll just interrupt you. This is sort of the public comment period, so we can absolutely have a conversation offline.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Next speaker is Elliot Hudson. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function and go ahead and keep it up.
Great.
Elliot is in the meeting.
Great. Elliot, welcome.
Good evening. Start the timer. Start the timer.
This is going to be short, Carol. I have a question about the timeline. This extremely compressed timeline is a recipe for a bad plan and bad results. It is my understanding, which could be wrong, that other cities in California are not allowing for the number of HCC reviews or planning for the number of HCD reviews as we are, that nobody else is doing this. So I'd like to know whose requirement this is. And unless it's absolutely required by state law, it really needs to be extended. No serious, thoughtful approach can be given in the time that's been outlined. And if it's a state law, please cite the statute or regulation that sets it forth. Otherwise, this is insane.
Okay. Must look to staff to see if there's like a ready answer for Elliot's question here. It's a good one.
I don't have the statute number,
I do.
but
I do. It's AB 215. What happens is that during the beginning of a law that went into effect the beginning of this year changed how much time HCD has to review initial drafts. It went from 2 months, which we had programmed in, to 3 months. And in several communications and webinars with HCD, they said, do not expect expedited reviews. Do not expect us to come up with responses to your housing element drafts until the 90th day, basically, and expect a second round of 90 days worth of reviews. So we've gone from 2 months of reviews with potential expedited review to now 6 months of review. The law states we have to have a housing element adopted by the city and submitted to HCD by the end of January 2023. And backing up from that means in order for us to hit all of the timeline requirements now with the HCD reviews, we have to get our draft out a lot sooner than we did before, essentially 4 months before we had to before. So every jurisdiction in the Bay Area is faced with the same problem. In fact, every jurisdiction for example, in the Southern California Association of Governments, which is like our ABAG, of the 191 jurisdictions in that area, only 2 are certified by the state, and their due dates was in last October. So no one is in compliance right now throughout the state in terms of, I won't say no one, but very few are in compliance. And the urgency to get our housing element in and reviewed means that we are trying to forestall potential negative consequences that kick into effect once we are out of compliance with state law. That's why this compressed timeline, we had it originally with only 2 months of review, and now they're saying 6 months of review.
And Elliot, there is a graphic included in the staff report that kind of lays out the timing of these reviews and the turnaround that's required from the city, because we will need to respond to those, adjust the draft based on the comments from the state, and then take it to both City Council and Planning Commission before resubmitting. So that might be a helpful depiction of the steps that we have to take to get to certification.
Well, it's my understanding that most cities are not doing this, that they're not shoehorning this critical analysis into a laughably short period of time.
They absolutely
And
are.
It's also my understanding that there actually may not be any serious consequences if we don't meet it. I mean, this is crazy. This is the future of our town, and to do it in this extremely compressed, insanely fast timeline is just nuts. If there's any latitude, even if we're in violation with no substantial consequences, we need more time.
Your point's well taken, and I think it goes to what state law has done, what they have advised us, and the council's direction, be it on the finance side of things, to budget conservatively, overestimate your expenses and underestimate your revenues. And the same goes here. We're happy to take direction from the council on that. I think you're right. Most other cities are not doing it this way. We actually started at 6 months to a year ahead of every other city that I'm in our kind of cohort, because we knew this was coming and we had things to contend with. So we are ahead of the game, and as I think Libby mentioned, we have been working for a year. So it's not as if we're trying to do the housing element within 2 months. We're not.
The public is only getting it now. The public is only getting it now.
I think we've answered the question, and happy to take direction from policy.
So I see a few hands up here. And I think what I want to make sure is if it's on this topic.
Perhaps.
It's on the timing.
Right. Well, we're going to, as a discussion item, I do want us to talk about that. I mean, that's like the first thing, and then we'll talk about the EAR.
No, I think we have to be fair to all the speakers. If we are going to have conversations with all the speakers, then we do it with all the speakers, or we follow the protocol. They have 3 minutes. There could be an answer, and that's it.
Okay.
So which way are we going to do it?
Well, I kind of was bending the rules on this a little bit, Carol, mainly to sort of make sure that we got the public input on this point, because this is pretty important territory.
They're all important. They're all public speakers.
This is true, but this is the matter at hand. 2 things. I see Stella, you got your hand up, and that's on this, or
Just a quick question. I have a follow-up question for Diana on her comment, but should I maybe hold it until later? We can circle back.
Yeah, I think so. I want to make sure we get the public comment, but please hold that.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So Sarah, are there other comments or questions from the public?
Patty Battersby is our next speaker. I don't see any other hands raised at this time, so if you would like to make a public comment, use that raise your hand function.
Great. All right, Patty, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question. I understood on the terraces EIR that was done by the city that they did talk about evacuation issues, and I'll be anxious to read the report when it's available. But of course, our neighborhood, the biggest concern we have is being in a high fire zone and the ability for us to evacuate during a fire. So in looking over what was prepared and shown tonight, I didn't see anything that showed that they would be looking specifically at the evacuation. So that's my first question. The second thing that I will say, just because it's already been brought up, is that I feel that the timeline is very, very unrealistic. And I think that it needs to be extended. And I think that if the city is not in compliance, then that's just the way it goes. We've got to do a thorough job. They're big, big decisions. And I think there's a lot of information that's coming forth about site selection that has to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Are there any other questions from the public? So bring it back for discussion. And I kind of think that, Sarah, I kind of want to make an observation and then have our group discuss. I'll be honest, many of the comments raised by folks like Elliot Hudson, I kind of wish we had more time on this as just a deliberative body of a sort to make a recommendation. I will say that, this is not the start of the show. We spent a good deal of time last year going through the housing 101 sessions in the different parts of the city. We had the 4 public input sessions. There's been a lot of outreach on the topic of the housing element, opportunity sites, and so on. So I think that we've covered ground on that. We've kind of circling back on this now that we've got the, I think the timing was set with the EIR. Frankly, I'd love more time. But I kind of do want to sort of like note that we're not starting from scratch here. I think the key is making sure that we get as much input from the public as possible. Let's see, I've got a whole bunch of hands here, so let me, and I do want to make a comment at the end, but let me go through the hands that are raised here. I've got Matt, Christine, Anna, and then Stella. So please go ahead.
Yeah, Jim, just to build on that, you're right. In the past, we did the summer workshops. We tried to work with people to submit them. But going forward, and Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, the public can continue to comment on these site selections when this goes to Planning Commission. They can comment again when it goes to City Council. When it comes back to HCD, there's going to be public meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Council, and that's going to happen over 2 review periods, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes, and then a 3rd review for when the City Council adopts it.
Yeah, so I think it's a mischaracterization to say all these decisions are being made in a 1-month period, not even including the stuff that we did in the past. Going forward, there's going to be another, if I do my math right, 9 months of opportunities for the public to continue to help us refine this, not us, the GPAC, but the city government. So am I correct in saying that, Diana? Okay.
Yes, you are. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Christine, you're up.
So I kind of disagree a little bit with what Matt's saying. I think once we put our stamp of approval on something, we've lost a whole layer of input from the public. I'm just going to say that with the mission statement, that took a lot of our time. And I think we lost a lot of time working on that and also working our communications to the residents of the city. We spent a boatload of time working on that. And really the housing element portion of it was put on the back burner so that we could get that mission statement taken care of. Now, the mission statement is a perfect example how I don't agree with Matt, because I think once we put our stamp of approval on it, we've lost a whole level of input from the public. Plus, basically that puts the GPAC that we're not going to be working on this stuff anymore. We have to look at these things right now. We have to look under every rock. We have to make every single attempt to make these sites work and look at every single one of them upside down, from behind, from 2 feet away, 100 feet away, because this is a huge deal. And I think we are doing our residents a disservice by just going forward, running through this the first time, putting our stamp of approval on it, because once we do that, we're basically done. Mission statement, for an example, that just thing went running by itself. We had input after we made our decision, and then it stopped. After GPAC put their stamp on it, it was done. So I do not agree. I think we need to think about very, very carefully about this timeline. I think we need to think very, very carefully how we're going to approach this, because once we start just putting a run through this on the first time, we've lost it. Those other sites that we've been looking at, the orange sites that we've already put aside, we can't even bring those up again. No, that's not the way this should be working. We need to look at these things very carefully. So I disagree. And that's all I have to say about that for now.
Okay, thank you.
Are
Anna,
we
you're up.
talking about the timeline or about CEQA?
We're talking about the timeline first. So I want to focus us on the timeline. And then
that's 7A on the agenda.
Well, let's see, the presentation follow the staff report where we were talking about the timeline and then CEQA. Instead of us going back and forth between the two, I figured let's talk through the timeline, kind of get that out, and then we'll discuss CEQA as the next item on that, all under 7A. No. Stella, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just wanted to voice my concern also about the limited review period that we have for this particular Section 3 review of opportunity sites. It is what it is. I understand that we can't move HCD, but we are the GPAC. We're the ones who've been spending a considerable amount of time focused on this area, and really, ideally, we should be able to do our thorough due diligence. So just wanted to make that comment. And then I have a question just to follow up on Diana's answer to Elliot Hudson about the switch from a 60-day review period to a 90-day review period. I had sent some questions to Diana about something I saw on HCD's website about them adding a 30-day open public participation period after the draft is after City Council says, yes, this is our draft, and that subsequent to that, there's a 10-day city processing of the comments.
No,
so is that part of this switch from 60 to 90?
No, that's an additional 40 days, and it's actually a public comment period of 40 days in total before we submit the first draft HCD. So
Okay.
That's new also. That's a new requirement, but we had already anticipated that we were going to have something of a public hearing or public comment period. It was not official, and now it is official, and we have to document that we had one. So that has to happen before the draft housing element the first time goes to the state for review.
Okay, so then that will happen, it sounds like, after May 23rd, per the current schedule, when council votes to submit the draft?
It will happen during that period when during either the plan. I don't know if Sarah has. We've been working on the schedule, trying to figure some of this out. I don't know. I don't have it right in front of me when that public review period would occur, but it could be the city council. The public review period does not have to have a city council action, although we can definitely make sure that we have either the planning commission and or the city council during that public review period. So do you have it in there? There it is.
Yeah,
From
so
April to the middle of May.
Yeah, so we hadn't anticipated opening that period prior to city council's action on it. So any final comments can be incorporated before council directs staff to submit the draft to HCD.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, this was in the timeline provided on January 20th as well. But it's light gray. I get that's hard to catch.
It totally went by me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I've got Chris and then Anna. Chris, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Actually, now that I saw that timeline, I'm wondering if it's possible to include that timeline in the agenda for the rest of our meetings, so that we can see if it's changed, but also it can confirm to us what the process is. Because I think, at least I am sweating a little bit about the amount of work that needs to be done. And my comment is actually about that. I feel like we still don't have even a rough estimate of how many units will be produced by the sites that we will be looking at. So we've okayed the green. We're going to talk about the yellow next week. The orange is iffy. And there are a couple of big pieces that we're going to talk about tonight. But really, if we included the universe of all sites except for red, what would we be talking about? And what is our buffer? So I guess I feel like, we're all harnessed up and we're headed for the finish line, but we don't know
The number would be the same as what we have right now. And that is because what would change would be we would reduce the density in the more sites we have, then we reduce the density of the areas that have the opportunity sites. So the more sites that we can add to it, the number goes down in terms of what the density is. Like if we did if we had a whole bunch of new sites in the downtown, it would go from 115 units to the acre to 75 units to the acre, for example. But the total number of units, the universe that we're trying to target and for which the EIR has analyzed will not exceed what we've already said would be the maximum build out with the buffer, which is the 2,100 units plus whatever 1,000 units or so buffer.
If I may, it seems like we're creeping into the opportunity sites territory, which is another item in our agenda. So I think maybe if there's questions or discussion about that, we might want to defer that to that item.
So we're looking at, I'm sorry, we're looking at a 50% buffer?
Well, no, I think I'm going to jump in on that one. We haven't gotten even the buffer at all. I think what was being referenced was what was in the EIR.
EIR, right.
So, so let's not, I don't even want to go there right now. I really want to focus this on like, we're talking the timeline, which is gnarly enough as it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last comment is that, and I'm echoing someone else on the committee who mentioned this, that as with the mission statement, I think Christine mentioned this isn't coming back to us. So we send it off, and for every revision that we've been talking about tonight, it never really comes back to us. So I feel like we need to do a really good job with the public, get as much public input as we possibly can before we let it go, because that's our one and final shot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Chris. Anna, I've got you up.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I will just start by saying I do understand the frustration or the feeling that once it leaves a given committee's hand, no matter which project it is, right? Each committee at the city of volunteers has, their parameters that they look at, and then it gets into the next body. And part of it is the overall process, right? Of certain committees have different tasks, different commissions or council has different tasks. But Diane, I'm going to kind of cue you up here. Sorry to put you on the spot. What I'm hearing is from public comment and from other comments from committee members is frustration with the rush or, the perceived rush, which is stemming from the January 31st, 2023 deadline. And I definitely understand the concerns that are being raised. One thing I'm hoping you can provide clarity on is the consequences. So we've heard that, there are no consequences, or maybe other cities aren't conforming, but are there actual consequences? And can you share with us so everyone is informed of just what those consequences actually mean?
Yeah, sure. The consequences include, there's now an enforcement unit at HCD to review whether or not jurisdictions are actually complying with the law. And as we've seen in certain Southern California locations, the state attorney general has gone after a number of communities for not complying with their RENA allocations. I have a great cheat sheet that I don't know if that made it ever into a packet, but it's from the state, which basically states that the five main categories are legal lawsuits and attorney fees can be levied against a jurisdiction based on a developer, an individual, the state, any entity that sues the city because it's not complying with RENA. The city can be forced to pay go through lawsuits and pay legal fees. The second one is loss of permitting authority. That means that the city would no longer be able to, until it got in compliance, would be able to produce or issue permits for building activity, and it would be that permit authority would be taken over potentially by a judge. These are all written down in the law. The third one, financial penalties of up to $600,000 a month for noncompliance. Court receivership, courts can appoint an agent to basically take over the housing processes in a local jurisdiction. And last but not least, and this is already in law, if we're not in compliance, many of our new developments would have to be approved as of right, that is, as a ministerial action with no input from the community in terms of, as long as it met certain aspects of the zoning code, excuse me, and the general plan, the city could not deny it, and it would be approved basically as of right. So that's just a short list of what's coming up. And these are things that are very real and very concerning for every jurisdiction that is trying to comply with housing law. And just as you may know, I'm involved with quite a number of other housing elements, and everybody is sweating bullets just like we are here in Lafayette. Lafayette is no different than any other jurisdiction that's trying to comply by January 31st, 2023.
Thank you.
Okay. Christine, I see your hand up again, and I've got Carol afterwards.
So, Diane, I have a question for you. So are those punishments, let's call them, so for a city that's doing their due diligence, they're working very hard at this, they're actually going to slap that kind of penalties on cities that maybe have submitted something and it got kicked back to us for some reason? I mean, there are 195 cities in Southern California they're going to do that to?
They can. They have the authority to do that. They
Well,
are not.
I understand that, but
Hang on.
we're looking at 197 cities that haven't been able to do it, much like us, because we're running out of time. And not to mention, I'm not talking about 6 months extra time. I'm talking about an additional 30 days, an additional 60 days. Are they going to slap such penalties on a city that is diligently working on a element like this to make sure we can get the affordable housing that we need? They're really going to slap a penalty on us?
The state has the problem is these are in statute, and so that means there are state laws that get invoked. The state has indicated that they will not refer cities to the attorney general, the state attorney general, as long as compliance, the jurisdictions are making good faith efforts to comply. Now, what that means for Southern California may be very different than what it means for Northern California. Our goal is to produce something that complies with state law to the best of our ability. And that's what I think the overarching goal here is.
I think it is too, but I'm not also here to get an A+ on this, right? I want to do something that is satisfactory to the state. I want to do something that is hopefully something that our residents are going to be backing us on, and that we've listened to them and put full input, and we have done our homework on this. So I understand that, we've got these deadlines, but is there some wiggle room in there? And the other question is, so this new 2 meeting thing, this new 90 days is an absolute must, or is it a advisory, or you should? What is it exactly? These 2 90-day windows that we have here that they have to, do we have to put a draft in, or can we go straight for the final?
No, the law states we have to put a draft in. The law changed. The statutory requirement is an initial 90-day review. The second 90-day review is based on HCD's working with Southern California jurisdictions, and why they're not in compliance is because there are so many problems with the housing elements that the state said you'll need another 90 days.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty interesting situation. 197 can't get it done. You're already telling me that you have several cities you're working with that are sweating bullets right now. So are we expected to put in a piece of cruddy work just to, make sure we make this sort of arbitrary deadline? I mean, really going 30 days over, even, 2 weeks. I mean, it's better than just giving them everything right now, having them approve it. And then I hear from all my neighbors, like, you guys didn't even talk to me about this. This is, I do not understand. I understand we have to try our best to do this, but I don't understand that we have to break our back doing this and make a huge mistake. This is our future here. This is what is this, a 10-year window? And, I understand all of these things. I understand that the state is saying you must, but there is reality here as well. And if we are still making a good faith effort, which I do believe we're doing 100%, that I cannot imagine they would come to us and say, you know what, you guys aren't trying hard enough. I mean, look at us. We've got people working who are volunteers, spending all of their time doing homework on this, looking up all the parcels. by themselves and then looking at tax documents to find out who owns property. You can't tell me we're not trying our best.
Okay.
So I really feel we have a good argument for that.
Okay.
Through the chair, I just want to just be clear that Diana's trying to help us stay within the.
No, I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand that. I'm just saying, I'm just
I
trying
think-
to challenge that.
Yeah, I think
that
the point's well taken. And I want us to move along here because there's a lot of wood to chop. And then I want to add a couple of things. Carol, you're on next.
Are you going or you want me to go?
You've got the floor.
I'm on. This, I don't know how big an issue this is, but maybe it's something we should vote on if most members of GPAC want to just ignore the state rule. Is that what most of us want to do? Or are most of us, or a majority of us, comfortable or feel we should follow state law? Now,
Carol,
if
I'm
we
sorry.
voted, I have the floor, I believe. If we voted not to follow state law, the consequences, Diana, we did get your report, your consequences from Greg Wolf on February 11th. I have them right here. Then maybe we should have an analysis of what that would mean if a developer came in, all right, and the state, let's say a big developer came in, and what the state could do if that developer could just develop, period. No, we have nothing to say about it. And then ask the city if they're, well, the residents, are you willing to take that kind of chance or not? It has happened. But I'd like to suggest, we seem to have so much discussion about this that the GPAC decide what they want to do.
Okay.
I'm suggesting we take a vote.
Yeah, I want to comment on that, but I want to make sure I've got two other folks with their hands raised, Anna and then Stella.
I was just gonna add, I strongly disagree with that. I strongly disagree that we should vote as GPAC if we want to ignore state law or if we want to adhere to it, especially when we have professionals on our larger team who are advising us on the state law, as well as staff who's advising us on state law. That's my personal opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. Stella and then Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Anna. I think that, we are between a rock and a hard place, but maybe there's two paths to go forward to think about. So one is, I think that GPAC could just say, we have no recommendation. We couldn't get there from here. Sorry, it's up to Planning Commission. I'm not saying that's advisable or appealing, but it's just potentially a path. Another would be potentially to look at how can we work a little bit more review into our schedule within now and March 15. So another forum, perhaps public meeting. That's all I've got. Just trying to add some person hours within the constraint that we have, the time constraint that we have.
Okay, thank you, Stella. And Chris?
I also feel that we should continue to be involved. And I'd like to suggest one way of being involved is to be part of the review process when the first draft comes back to Lafayette. I thought I heard that the Planning Commission will get it to review. So can the GPAC be part of those reviews? I mean, we are doing an incredibly steep learning curve here. And for us to, battle this out as it looks like we're doing, and just hand it off and say that, our job is done. We have an amazing amount of knowledge now on the committee about the opportunity sites and the process. Why can't we continue to work with the Planning Commission and the City Council on the redrafts?
I think that's
just a thought.
Thank you, Chris. I think it's actually a great question. So I'm thinking a few things here. One of which is, would I like us to have more time to go through all this? I sure as hell would. And from the comments from the public and from what many of you said, I'd love to have more time here. And we acknowledging that we've had a lot, we've done a lot of work already on outreach. I don't want to dismiss that at all, because that's real. We got a lot of feedback, kind of a sense of where people in the community are on this. Folks in Happy Valley have been really clear about that. I hear all that. By the same token, we're operating in playing by rules that others have set. In this case, it's the state. And I look at what Diana said, and she's kind of read through what the statute gave us, and the state has tightened up the screws on communities like ours, and we're really kind of marching to their drumbeat on this. For me, think it's above GPAC's pay grade to just have more sessions to go through all this. I managed to finagle the March 15th one after talking with our mayor and staff to give us a little more time. But if the motion were for GPAC to add on time, which pushes back the schedule that staff has come up with, I would be a no on that, because I don't think it's ultimately responsible. We're dealing with a reality here where the state has told us they'll take 90 days. They'll get back and they'll come back at us again for 90 days. And I've dealt with the state before in my prior life. And when this Department of Finance or whatever says they're going to take 90 days, they take it. So that's just reality. And I want to say parenthetically, because I've picked this up from some members of the public, where there's a feeling that staff is pushing something here on this, or a consultant. And I have to say, staff, in my mind, has played this right up the middle. They've been honest and straightforward with what they've given us. I've spent a good deal of time with Chris as vice chair and now as chair since November, dealing with staff. I've never had them sort of like pitch one thing or another. So I just want to be real clear on that. They're making recommendations, but that's based on their professional background. We can take them or not if you talk about specific sites. And with what feedback that Dan has given us, I've spent some time looking at the filings by some of the Southern California cities. I know many of them because I've worked with them. Substantively, the outline they have provided is what we've been working through here with Diana. I think is a case where sometimes if you don't like the message, you shoot the messenger. I do not like the message, but I think that shooting the messenger, whether it's staff or the consultant, is totally misapplied. So my feeling is we just have to deal with reality, as bad as that is, acknowledging that the state holds all the high cards here. And I think we try to make it work. So a few things here where if someone wants to drop a motion on the floor to allow GPAC more time, that's fair. We can go through that and just see where people are on that. I think that if the council decided to allow more time for this, at the risk of having an issue with HCD, that's a council call. They can make that decision. That'd be great. I don't think that's a GPAC call necessarily. I think it's important for us to try to make sure that with respect to, especially the March 15th session, which is going to be where we try to get our hands around this, that we get as much information out there to the public through the channels the city has or whatever else we might have, because I think that's going to be an important one. So that's kind of where I am on this. I see several hands raised now. So let's take the other comments here and then get to the EIR. So Carol, you have the floor.
I would like to make a suggestion that we have a couple of meetings where we just talk about the opportunity sites. We've been meeting for 2 hours already, and we have not gotten to the site inventory at all. We still have to do 10A, which I think will take at least half an hour. So we're not doing the opportunity sites. That may be where the push is coming from. So I would like to suggest we have a couple more meetings where we just do the opportunity sites and try to get that work done. And if we need some of all this other, then we have an additional meeting for that. But we have a couple of meetings and just focus, get our work done on the opportunity sites. That's my suggestion, because now we're probably going to be going till 10 o'clock. And I don't think after 4 hours, people are really as sharp as 10 o'clock at night as they are at 6. So that's my suggestion.
I hear that, Carol, just to kind of understand better. So maybe you'd advocate for a meeting next week to sort of pick up what we would have, I guess it's 8B or 7B rather.
7B, just on that top, nothing else on the agenda.
Okay. All right.
And we may need another meeting even. And that would certainly, I would think, take up a lot of this, that we are not spending the time on the opportunity sites, which is certainly true tonight. 2 hours. We're not even on that item yet.
Okay.
So I would recommend the next 2 meetings be totally opportunity sites, and we get that done.
Right.
And if there's a big hullabaloo about doing something else, then we have an additional meeting devoted to those other items.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yeah. Yes, Diana.
clarifying question for staff, if and for the chair, if that is to be, the meeting is to be a week from today. I believe that's the Planning Commission hearing at which the Planning Commission is hearing some housing element stuff. Is that correct? I think section 2 that night. So I would either recommend earlier before their meeting or another time.
Okay. That's helpful.
Or earlier.
Or earlier, maybe.
Day before.
Okay, we could ferret that out. I've got Stella and then Susie and Christine up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Carol's suggestion is a good one, to add another meeting in between now and March 15. I did want to just clarify the change in the HCD review periods from the 60 to the 90. Do they really require 2 90 reviews? Like, could it possibly be that we do such a great job, we turn it in, they look at first draft 90 days and they say, great, you're good? Or is it just the odds are so poor that
The odds are so
have
poor.
to expect?
Their odds are so poor, and HCD, and if you want, I can get you the video of their webinar saying the statutory requirement is 90 days. You must plan for another 90-day review. We're not going to be able to get it done without 2 90-day review periods.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd check out the webinar. There's one other small point I wanted to raise, because I know you described the sticks, for lack of a better word, but there are some carrots, right? If we get a housing element that's in compliance by the deadline. And I just wonder, could staff speak to if that's meaningful to the city?
It's money, basically. It's money coming in the form of PLHA money, which is permanent local housing money, HSC grants, any sort of affordable housing grants, et cetera, would come through with a certified housing element. Otherwise, we would not be eligible for them, or projects would not, in Lafayette would not be eligible for them. And the city would lose regional transportation funds that I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, come through Contra Costa County.
That's a stick, not a carrot, the loss of those funds.
Yeah. You get it.
No, I guess
certified housing element.
If we certify, we get a carrot.
You're right. So it could be viewed either way.
Yeah, we don't just get sticks, but we might not just get sticks. Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to see the webinar.
Yeah. Dan, if you could send that link, it might be helpful. Susie, I got you up.
Okay, great. This was just mentioned a couple of times, and I just wanted to go back to it. To streamline the process and the importance of getting the information out to the public, I just wanted to say my email is available on the city website. So a lot of people do send me their feedback, and that's a great way for me to get it out in the meeting. So if people want to be heard and feel like they can't get on, I just wanted to put that out there, that it is available and open to anybody.
Okay, great. Thank you. Christine, you're up.
I had a couple of clarifying statements to make. One of them is that when I'm talking about, I'm not talking to her comment about us purposefully breaking any laws. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about spending the time that we need to spend to get all of these sites looked at thoroughly. Therefore, the comment about possibly any extra meetings is exactly what I'm talking about. So I think we need to make sure that that is not what we're talking about here, is breaking any laws or statutes. What it is trying to work this out so that we can look at every single possible options that we have. So the idea about having extra meetings, I think, is really great. And I highly recommend that we continue doing that. I would support that fully. But I also think this possibly needs to be tossed back to the city council to see how they want to handle this. If they want to stay with the very few 3 or 4 meetings, or squeezing in a few more extra here and there would be adequate to do our job. So I think we should possibly make a motion on that and try to figure out if we should refer back to city council and say, what should we do about this timeline? If we can push it farther out and still make all of our deadlines. And the other thing is to look at, if we've got a slam dunk because we worked so hard and got it cut, measured twice, cut once, then that should take out a lot of some of the extra time needed possibly at the other end. So I think, if we're presenting them with something that is practically finished, then because we've done our due diligence, we've done our homework, we've got a solid package. I feel like, we're doing a lot of that hard work up front and saving time at the other end of this as well. So I don't know how to do that, because I don't know how to, do we make a motion, or is that something other people would be interested in doing?
Yeah, so I do see the mayor's hand up, so I'm going to give her the floor. She's the mayor. And then maybe we can chat about meetings and motions. So please, Mayor Geringer.
Okay, so I could wait until you bring a motion forward to send it back to council. And I'm speaking, just for myself, but I believe that the process, I believe that staff and the consultant have laid out a process that for very good reasons, backward mapping to what we need to get done. I believe that what we've seen in other areas of the state in terms of not getting their housing element certified. And I don't know all the numbers percentage-wise of how many times they've been, but that we need those two review periods. I don't believe that we should push it back and say that we're just going to get it down the first time, because I think with the changes from the last cycle and the sort of more intense review of these, that we should plan on having those come back. And I also want to back up and say, and it's not going to be because this amazing group of people and staff and consultants have not done their job. You guys signed up to, lead this. You started with the most difficult element because of deadlines and because of all of the timelines and requirements that we have. And you're all working very hard to make sure that we're doing that. And I just, want to say that it won't be because of that, but I would not support extending the deadline so that we don't have those two opportunities. The other piece of it is that every step of the way is a public outreach possibility. And if we can look at other ways to get the word out, then that would be great. We've done postcards, we've done social media, we've been sending information out. We have people can sign up on our e-alerts. I suppose we could put some signboards somewhere. I know that people like those, but we have had public input and public comment throughout the whole process. And I want to again say that I appreciate the transparency and the outreach that staff and members of the GPAC have done in their communities. I mean, a lot of the public input that Chair Cervantes has mentioned, we've gotten because you've been out doing your work. We also have another section on the agenda tonight to talk about additional outreach opportunities. So I believe that we've added an additional meeting opportunity and that it does push the calendar back. When we looked at the calendar in January, we said there was a little buffer in there and we're starting to use that buffer. But I think that I believe that we're on the right course. And so we can have a vote and decide to send it back. But what it does is just takes away from the work that you're doing and the time that will be left to get the work done. I think I had one more. Oh, and then the idea of other meetings and committee member Singer, her recommendation to have other meetings and just focus on the opportunity sites, I think is a great idea. I think that Chair Cervantes wanting to bring forward the model that Colin Elliott has developed to have that presented and be able to ask questions about it is a good idea. I think that I heard Christine and Rasmussen, committee member Rasmussen, say that that things that were taken off last week can't be brought back. I don't believe that that's true, but staff can, kick me under the table or tell me that I'm wrong. But I think moving forward and having those additional meetings, that I believe that with the staff and the consultant and with this team that you can get this done and we'll have input along the way. So thank you for listening. I usually want to step back and let you find your way, but I feel very strongly that it would be losing time to go backwards on that.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Carol, I see your hand up, but is this about the idea of doing a meeting next week?
I just want to clarify that when I suggested the meetings, they be only for the site, for opportunities, nothing else on the agenda, because now we're almost 2.5 hours and we're still not to the site at this meeting.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. So I actually think Carol had a great suggestion. And so let me try to frame this for our group here, which is, I don't know if we need a meeting, but a motion rather, but I think having a session next week, which is in between, it's a tweener, I guess, but it would to take care of, I guess it's item 7B, and maybe we can start to talk about the yellow sites in that as well. Just focus on that would be one way to get through that. The idea of 7B was to sort of spend some time talking about some of the bigger sites that have some potential swing in the way RENA works. And there are pluses and minuses with all of them, but at least to try to get our hands around that. So we were, I think, understood all the issues that went into them. But we could make it focused on that. I'd noted earlier, Colin Elliott had sent something in, I think it was today, with some sites. And so we can maybe see how we figure all that out. But yeah, I think just a session focused on opportunity sites next week would be a good one. We could maybe just look at calendars on that, but I see 2 hands up. So let me go to Christine and then to Stella.
Okay, so my question is, Mayor Geringer just told me that we are going, those orange sites that we voted with thumbs up and thumbs down the other day. So those sites are not off the table? They're still on the table, or am I misunderstanding that?
So if I could interject here, I mean, we went through an exercise last session to go through them, acknowledging that, the red sites are really highly problematic based on HCD feedback. The orange sites were sort of not so great based on HCD feedback. We just wanted to go through them. My feeling would be that if there are some sites that, in the end, maybe said, look, if HCD said don't use gas stations, maybe we don't use gas stations, but there may be other sites that are worth considering. And, I, for only one, would say that we would be open to that. I don't view them as permanently off the table. I think we just need to be realistic. And if we got guidance from HCD, we should listen to it. Would be my mantra on that.
Okay, well, like I said before, sometimes they don't get all the facts, right? And we know more things than they do. So that's why I just want to make sure that I understand correctly that the orange sites are not off the table.
Yeah.
And I also want to understand that the things that were presented and that will be presented from the Colin Elliott study, that is going to be a meeting on its own or part of our next meeting?
I don't even, I think I would want to think through how we can work all that out and make it, I mean, so let me back up here. I could see a meeting next week. We'll certainly do item 7B in that. That was the big sites. Maybe we could spend some time on the yellow sites, or maybe split, or maybe we're, I'm sure we've got basically be next week, and then I guess it'd be March 1, which is an already scheduled meeting. I think the idea would be to sort of go through the opportunity sites so we could focus on the 15th on how do we pull it all together. I guess for my druthers, I would say, I think it'd be best if we've gone through the opportunity sites so we can work on kind of what the mix is on the 15th. Is barred in, is barred out, for example, or how would you allocate density to different map areas and so on? I mean, I think that's where we need to get to on the 15th. I hope we're through all the opportunity sites by then. That'd be my 2 cents on that. I see Stella's got her hand up, and she's got more than her 2 cents in her pocket than I do, so please.
Got a lot of pennies here. Okay, let me get my thoughts, get my bearings here. So I agree with a meeting next week to focus solely on opportunity sites. I would say also put a placeholder in the calendar for something around March 8th, and we can drop it if we don't need it. I guess, I just have 2 observations. One is that I think some of the frustration that GPAC is having, some members of GPAC are having, is just that we haven't looked at these lists since maybe July or so. So we've had it before, but we haven't had it very recently. And so that's where we have this kind of, 3 meetings, let's just get it done. But it's a lot, it's a big task. The other comment is that I think one of the issues that I've had as I've been reading through the material, the lists, the spreadsheets, is that it's not really totally clear to me what makes a site an orange versus a yellow, because we don't really have, we know what the rubric is because we've gotten that from Diana and her summary of HCD and what they consider to be selling points or take points off of a site. But what I don't really feel I have or understand is the scorecard for each of the sites, like what made it an orange versus a yellow. Some of them are really obvious. I understand that, like it's a gas station, so it's in the yellow or in the orange. But I just have a feeling like there's probably some sites that are in the they're in the gradient between yellow and orange. And those are the ones I think, I'd like to spend some time thinking about and looking at. So I don't know how we could get that information, that scorecard, but it's just something that's been kind of rattling around in my mind. Just wanted to put it on the table.
Okay, thank you. Stella, I think your idea of maybe penciling in a possible meeting on March 8th or whatever might make sense. We'll be spending a lot of time together here. So how about this? Can we just look at our calendars here? Because I really think there's a groundswell to set aside time next week. I gather that we've got a planning commission meeting next Tuesday. So we want to avoid that that's a conflict. Because
March 1 is planning.
Whenever that is, and perfect. Thank you so much.
Is this March or?
Sorry, this is February. So we're on the 15th right now. And so the 21st is a holiday. The 22nd is a planning commission meeting. 23rd is a Parks, Trails and Recreation Commission meeting. And then there's potential for the 24th after the Senior Services Commission meeting.
Okay.
Senior Services.
So for my druthers, we could meet during the day if that works for folks, or we could do it in the evening. Although it sounds like the 22nd is out. Carol, you've got PTR on the 23rd, and Don, I think you've got, it's 3:30, I guess. So the evening of the 24th could work. Or maybe during the day on the 22nd or 23rd?
I'd just like to say I work during the day.
Yeah.
So I'm not available, sorry.
Understand, Susie.
Yeah.
I remember that life.
Yeah.
So how about the
Might have one
20?
of the few, but
Yeah, no, I'm glad someone's adding to the economy here. How about the 24th? Like at 6? Would that work?
Sounds
for
good.
folks?
and I could do as early as 4 o'clock on the, actually I could do as early as 3 o'clock on the 24th, if that works for anybody.
That,
I mean, if that helps to have it early.
okay. I'm game. You said 3 o'clock?
Yeah, I can do anything.
Well,
I have a meeting
Senior
with
Service
everybody.
Commissions is not over till 5.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I'm only one. If you guys all want.
Well, I want to, I'm being mindful of, we'll lose our planning commissioner contact on one day, and I want to try to keep the whole and respect that. Maybe 5:30 on, because that Donna gives you a half-hour break. Is that enough?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I can go black and eat here.
Right. So how about 5:30 on Thursday, the 24th? I see the mayor's hand up.
Yeah, I will make it work, but I was just curious that if folks could meet at 4 o'clock on Thursday, is there a way they could meet at 4 o'clock on the 22nd? Sorry, Anna, prior to the planning commission meeting.
I'm sorry, I can't meet on that day.
Okay, I'm supposed to be out of town, but I will make it work on the 24th.
Okay.
So Jim, would you go to when are our meetings now? The 24th.
Right.
Any more? Are we meeting on the, all right, 24th, and then March?
Yeah, so let's
We'll have March 1st.
So the 24th at 5:30, I think we lock on that. We have a meeting on March the 1st. That's scheduled. We have one on the 15th. So the idea is to bracket something the week of March 7th. We may not need it, maybe we do, but at least we've got it penciled in. Tuesday the 8th, would that work for folks?
Yes, that would be better. That's what the next week after the 1st.
Namratha is shaking her head no, I think.
Just none of those dates work for me, I think.
Okay, all right.
But we have March 1st and 15th. So if we have it the 8th, we have
Right.
3 in a row,
Right.
right?
Yeah, 3 in a row. Actually 4 in a row, I think, because we have
4 in a row.
Yeah.
Okay, now which ones would be just devoted to opportunity sites? So we don't get into this doing it at 9 o'clock at night.
Okay, so on the meeting on the 24th, that's opportunity sites.
Okay.
On the meeting on the 1st, the way I had thought about this, the note I sent out to you all, we're looking at opportunity sites. The meeting on the 8th, if we have it, would be opportunity sites. And then ideally, we'll wrap the opportunity sites either the 1st or the 8th, so we can focus on the big picture. That would be the idea. That's the 15th. I kind of really want to sort of keep that because that could be also a good date for, trying to get public input on when you look at how all this plays out. So that would be the concept here.
And the 1st is also opportunity sites
That's right.
only. So we have 3 meetings on opportunity sites
Right.
only. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay. Mayor Gallagher, you had your hand up for just a minute. Okay. All right.
Then
All
I
right.
would just not put it down.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So I think we've got this set. Staff is going to send out the meeting confirms for those 3 for next Thursday at, I think we agreed to 5:30. Is that right?
The 24th,
The 24th.
5:30.
March 1st is a scheduled meeting. March 8th will be a potential meeting. Let's just say, assume it kicks off at 6. And then of course there's the 15th, another scheduled meeting, which would start on the 6th. The meetings on the 24th, the 1st and the 8th will be opportunity sites. The meeting on the 15th will be, God willing, sort of pulling it together so we can then make a recommendation to planning. Now I see two hands up, Beth and Dawn.
Yeah, Sarah, I just wanted to know if your staff has had any success in pulling together marketing materials. If we're doing this big push, looking at opportunity sites, we're going to have information out. I want to make sure that, yeah, we have the marketing pieces in place for the community.
Yep, I'll connect with Suzanne on that to make sure it's
Okay.
well advertised.
Yeah.
I also just do want to note that there will not be additional staff reports. We'll keep it on the regular schedule. Okay.
Yeah. We'll run a lean operation on this one, I think. Don.
Yeah, my question is simply, this afternoon I drove around and tried to look at some of the addresses on the sites, et cetera, to kind of get a better feel. And I'm just wondering if there isn't some advantage, and I realize we can't certainly do more than 3 or 4 people at a time, but to perhaps go in groups of 2 or 3, just to look at some of these things so that we have some better sense rather than just looking at an address. I've lived in the community for 50 years, but I don't know every one of these addresses, and I have not looked at them in the same way as we may be called upon as we're choosing A, B, and C's.
That's a great idea. I think that would be, Chris, I think you got your hand up. And
Oh yeah, I just wanted to help Dawn out because funny, I did the same thing today, except I didn't get in the car. I took the addresses. I was just getting a bird's eye view of yellow coded properties. And I just went online and Googled the address. And if it's raw land, you can look at it on Google Maps. If it's a home or land with a home on it, you can look at it on Redfin or Zillow. So there are a number of tools online that help you see it. And that was very, very helpful, especially for undeveloped property.
Okay.
So John, I'll remind you of the 4th workshop we held last spring. There was that worksheet that included all those resources like LoopNet, shows commercial properties, city's community view map, all that information is available in that worksheet. And it was included in the last staff report packet.
Right.
I guess I would say, I kind of like Don's idea of walking around with folks. I think we just need to be really mindful of the Brown Act limits, which we'll touch on hopefully in a minute. So small groups, not big. So, and I think it could be just informal where, Don, I was thinking this kind of like along your lines. So maybe you and I will go for a walk.
Maybe you and I can have a walk, Jim.
That's where we'll end up at the roundup probably, given the way we're going here.
There you go.
Carol, you've got the floor.
I love Don's idea. I'd also like to suggest that staff send out to everybody how you go on the Contra Costa maps and pull up all the parcels and have all the information and the outline. And I'm not sure everyone knows how to do that, but that's the easiest way to see what the parcel is. But I think staff should send out the steps. There are only like 3 of them, but how you do it.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Carol. Okay, I think we're done with the timeline topic. And Luke Evans, God bless you for sticking around here. In as much as we've talked about the EIR, I want to make sure there aren't any discussion items related to that. It's going to be out tomorrow for the eager beavers who want to sort of get the jump on it. Thank you, Luke. You're back. Are there anything related to the EIR that we'd want to discuss here?
And I do just want to point out too that Luke will be joining us for at least 2 of the other meetings that we'll be having together. So he'll be able to answer more specific questions about the findings.
Right.
This is more just general.
That's right. And in addition to all our meetings, there will be a joint session on the 28th to spend some quality time with the EIR. Okay, I don't see, Christine, you got your hands up. Is that related to EIR?
Yeah, actually it is, and I'm so sorry to ask, but I just started thinking about this. Can I just ask one really quick question about the VMT? Or can I do that? So the question is, the VMT actually is more important then, so the reduction in commuting time, or I guess in cars, is now the calculation we use rather than congestion? Or am I looking at that right?
That's
amount-
basically what the law says. The law says that consider it, it doesn't mean that the cities can't consider congestion. It just can't be found to be a significant impact under CEQA. So the direction is shifted toward VMT, vehicle miles traveled, which is supposed to kind of get you to the same place. If VMT goes down, well, I know, but if VMT goes down, then that means people are driving less. There's less miles being expended, less emissions being cranked out, et cetera. So that's the rationale behind the law.
So they're basically saying that because you have, for example, we're looking at a multi-family, larger building with higher density, that the VMT would be less because in theory, those tenants or residents would be taking public transportation to San Francisco as opposed to getting in their car from Brentwood and driving into San Francisco. Is that how I'm looking at it?
Yes,
that's very rudimentary, but okay.
Well, that's accurate. Higher density development tends to have lower VMT per capita, generally.
Even if those people don't necessarily work in San Francisco and would take part. That's got nothing to do with it. It's just proximity to transportation.
Well, that's a big part of it, certainly. But generally speaking, low density development generates more VMT versus higher density development generates less.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you, Christine. I'm glad we had a question from Luke after all that time. Greg, I think you've got your hand up.
Well, I was starting to wave, but then I guess it's a question. Can we thank Luke for his time tonight and then look forward to seeing him at a future meeting?
I'll
see you all next week.
God love you for doing EIRs, Luke. It's glad someone's doing well. There you have two people on the screen who are doing this kind of work. But thank you so much for your time.
You bet. No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're looking forward to sort of actually going through this and understanding it better. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Thanks, Luke.
Okay, so that means we finished 7A. 7B, we will punt to next week. That's the site inventory discussion. There was a affirmative furthering for housing outreach, which I think was just a catch up. Sarah, you and I talked about that a bit earlier. I think, is there just a brief update for folks on that? I think it's just the wheels are in motion on that outreach plan, if I understand correctly.
Correct. Yes. So we are starting promotion for 2 workshops regarding affirmatively furthering fair housing that will be held in mid-March. So information is available on the website. We'll be doing promotion in the weekly roundup. There will be a postcard getting mailed out with text translated into Spanish and Chinese. And we will also be reaching out to our stakeholder list to promote the event.
So just for the group, there's a standing call that I have with Matt as the vice chair with staff to sort of talk through things. And I don't know if we can segue or splice in some of the outreach we talked about here with this or not, but we'll pick that up tomorrow when we have our catch up. We'll see if that can work. Okay, thank you so much. And then it was like Brown Act requirements. I see Greg Wolf's got his hand up.
Grace Dixon also has her hand up. So if that item on the agenda is, if there's public comment on that item.
Thank you. I think I dropped the ball on that one. Sarah, I should have asked for public comment. Mea culpa. So I do see Grace's hand up. Thank you very much, Greg. So maybe if the members of the public want to make a comment on that topic, please. It'd be the affirmative furthering for housing outreach. Grace is with us. Thank you, Grace.
Yes. Hi, no worries. You guys, are juggling a lot. You're spinning a lot of plates. So this was regarding the outreach. However, I think I heard there's another meeting tomorrow regarding outreach. Is that correct?
Tomorrow.
No, so
No.
I think it was my parenthetical that I have a follow-up meeting along with Matt as the vice chair with staff. We just debrief on what we did, make sure we have our what our next steps are in line, and that's it's running the show here in the behind the curtain. And to the extent we can talk about public outreach with this card that's going out, that's what I was referencing.
Okay, well, in essence, what I was going to say, and you can cut me off if I'm out of line, is that I agree with Carol and Teresa. You have tried many ways to engage the public, but this is a complex issue and one that the public is tempted to disengage quickly because it is complex. And it is suddenly getting very real because we're talking about sites here. So twofold. Number one, on the spreadsheet, if we might make the spreadsheet a little bit easier for the common person to understand, and that is to insert a column that gives the common person's descriptor of that site. So for instance, if you're talking about a site on Mount Diablo that is Sterling Cleaners, call it, insert a column that says Sterling Cleaners, and that way the common person could understand that that's the site you're talking about. And then finally, if staff could, I like to communicate, right or wrong. I like to make things understandable by the common person. So if there was a 3-sentence descriptor that neighborhoods could send out on what is actually transpiring at these opportunity site meetings. And, let's not call it a GPAC or anything like that. Let's call it something that the common person could understand. And, just so they won't glaze over. And that way we could say that we did our utmost to communicate in sentences that regular people could understand in how the community is changing. And, there are people all over the map, including me, on how they feel about what the community is changing, but at least they know. And that's it.
Grace, thank you so much. I think, Christine, you got your hand up. Well, I'm sorry, Christine, before we do that, Sarah, are there any other public comments?
One other hand raised at this time, Cheryl M.
Okay, great. Cheryl, welcome.
Hi. So I'm just going to reiterate, just to say, to keep things brief, I really appreciate what Grace said. I get lost in site numbers that city codes use. It's irrelevant to me. It's a language that I don't understand. I have to go figure out what it is. Addresses, I have learned through the process where 3400 block is in Mount Diablo Boulevard, but the average Joe does not. So calling it Sterling Cleaners, calling it the old Cecilia's, calling it whatever, I totally agree and second what Grace Dixon just said, make it really easy for us out here in the world. However that's done on a map, I'll leave that to you guys. And then our wonderful communication analyst, I would love to use her because you've rattled off like a whole bunch of dates and they've changed and I have not written them down. So is there a way that we can get it in the roundup or the almost daily briefings? Use the tools, all the tools you have, just to say all these dates are coming up, because I've lost track of them, because you worked very, very hard to come up with some wonderful dates, but in the process I haven't written them down. So so just communication that way. And Mayor brought up signboards. I'm a big advocate of signboards because it's a way that on Mount Diablo Boulevard people drive by and see it. I'm not sure the language to put. I agree GPAC is probably something the average Joe isn't going to know, but I love signboards just saying something Grace Dixon would probably be great at coming up with. And leave it at that. Thank you so much for all your efforts and time. This is very complicated and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Great, Cheryl, thank you so much. Any other public comments?
One more hand raised.
Okay.
Sharon?
Okay. Sharon, welcome. I think you're on mute, Sharon. Or should we?
Okay, that should work now. I wanted to say thank you, of course, for all your work. It's amazing that you're volunteers and you do this. As far as getting information out to the public, we were in a pandemic and we still kind of are. So I think that getting the public involved, engaged, was really, really difficult. And so I think maybe that's where the disconnect was. I know that there was quite a bit of effort put into public involvement over the last year, but I think that we were really up against a lot of obstacles because of the pandemic, of how to engage the public and get their feedback. And so when Susie Kelly mentioned that, she had a lot of interaction with people that said they didn't know about this, when I think that that's true. And that's my comment.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other public comments, Sarah?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
I don't either. Great. Okay. I think we're in the last legs of this. I did want to, we're not going to talk about opportunity sites tonight. This is something I was going to raise. And so let me just do this, which is, to me, the spreadsheet is the key. It's the linchpin to what we're doing here. And God bless Stella. She's been spending time going through it, which is some of the questions that she's raised. And I was thinking that it would be helpful if a subgroup, a subcommittee, as it were, maybe spends a little time with the spreadsheet, with staff and with Diana, just to sort of make sure that everything kind of lines up. And I was going to suggest Stella for that. And I was going to suggest Chris for that as well, because she and I spent a fair amount of time last year going through this, working through one of Colin Elliott's spreadsheet. So I was going to say, if they're willing, we'd have a group of 3. Maybe if there's another person who really likes Excel, who'd want to join that, that'd be great. But I kind of think I wouldn't want to have more than 4. We also have to be mindful of the Brown Act. So I would say I don't think we need a motion for that. I think the chair can appoint a subcommittee or working group, or whatever you want to call this, but I think it'd be helpful in our effort. So I guess I'd say, unless there's an objection, then what I'd like, and obviously Stella and Chris, you may have changed your mind since we spoke earlier, but I think I'd like to go with that to help us all feel like we've got more eyes on this thing. So, and we'll follow up on our work. Now I have
I'd be happy to help.
Sorry?
Oh, I just said I'd be happy to help in
Great.
any way that I can.
Thank you, Stella. And Chris is nodding your head, so that's great. Thank you. Thank you both. Yeah, it's great. Now I have 2 hands. So Sarah Blumenfeld, hopefully you're not going to tell us that you're out of this group after the session we just had.
No, I'm just glad that you didn't ask me to vote to break state law at the same night that I took the oath.
Took that oath.
That wasn't going to work for me.
Thank you. Okay. Carol, I think you're the last on the docket here.
Okay, when they work on I want to be sure they leave the APN numbers on.
Yep, that's helpful.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
also what they put on matches what the APN description says.
FC, well, I think we'd have APNs are those are key. The county descriptor sometimes doesn't necessarily match what the property actually looks like, but what
It matches the boundary of the property.
yeah. I mean, right. I was talking more than the name. So okay, that's good input. Thank you. Sarah, you have your hand up still. Did I cut you off inadvertently, or just something else? Okay, all right. Then I think I did say an item here for Brown Act requirements. Sarah or Renata, I don't know if there's anything you want or just flag folks on, or talked on that earlier. Is there a Cliff Notes version of what you wanted to talk through?
Super Cliff Notes. Just want to remind everyone to not, there's several different ways that you could violate the Brown Act, one of which is having a meeting of a quorum. In this case, it's 6 or more. Just where I think we've been advocating to keep it at 4 or fewer, just to be on the very safe side. There's also, if you send out a note and other people reply to that note, then the majority of people on the group know what other people are thinking outside of a meeting. That is also a violation. It is also a violation to sort of play telephone where you said, I talked to so-and-so and they said this, and so-and-so talks to so-and-so and they said this. And that would also be a violation. So we want to have all of our information and deliberations in a public setting in a very open and transparent manner. And so I just wanted to reiterate that and make sure everyone is on board with that.
Thank you. And Matt's got his hand up.
Yeah, I guess, Jim, I know it's late, but I guess this meeting that 5 people had with Save Lafayette seems like it is skirting the Brown Act, and I guess it's just an integrity issue there of that many people meeting with an outside group. I just think as members, we've got to be careful about the integrity of what we do, whether it's posting on social media or how we conduct ourselves in these small group meetings. This one, it looks shady, to be honest with you. And it was unfortunate. And I'm hoping we all keep that in mind going forward.
Okay.
I mean, Jim and I were, when I became vice chair, we talked about wanting to have coffee with people just to get their feedback. And we got called out that was a Brown Act violation. Hell, we were just trying to find out what people were thinking. So I hope we all keep this in mind. That's it.
Thank you, Matt. Anna, and then Carol.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would also just echo Matt's comment, because I don't know if it's because I'm a liaison, but I'm not hearing about any of these meetings when people are talking about, oh, I met with so-and-so, or, oh, these couple of people met with so-and-so. So I'm curious how people are finding out about those meetings and coincidentally, attending. So I agree with Matt. I think it's just good to be aware of the perception. Thanks.
Thank you. And Carol?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to be aware of that. I think we've met with, not me, but with the Inclusive Lafayette group. I think there've been a number of meetings with groups in Lafayette. I don't know whether that's different from having coffee with people who are not a group, or what is a group?
Well, Carol, what I was referring to is when a group of GPAC people meet with another organization. For example, I've had coffee with Inclusive Lafayette. It was just one-on-one. Jeremy asked for a meeting, and I did it. I've met with some of the downtown people. So that's what I was referring to, is a group of GPAC people meeting with another organization. I think there's an integrity issue there when we do that in the way it was done. That was my point.
Okay, but this wasn't an organization.
Yes, it was. And from what I heard, it was with Colin Elliott, who was part of Save Lafayette. Am I wrong?
But Jeremy is part of
Right.
inclusive
But I was one person. I wasn't with 4 or 5 other people.
Jeremy has met one-on-one with quite a few.
Right, but that's okay. That one-on-one doesn't even come close to the Brown Act. I'm talking about it. The thing I was focusing on, Carol, was a group of 5 GPAC people meeting with that organization.
So Matt, let me ask you a question.
One person.
No, Christine, Carol's talking.
That's my point. We were invited by one person.
I understand.
So
but there was 5 of you there.
yeah,
right?
we were. Yes.
Okay,
we were
that's what
not a quorum.
it doesn't look good, in my opinion. I may not be the only one that thinks this, that a group that's just skirting the Brown Act meets with an organization. That's my point.
All right, so one person that's in an organization.
I'm talking about the GPAC side, Carol. I'm not talking about the other side, the people you're meeting with. That's fine. I meet with the chamber every month, but it's me alone.
Park and Rec every month.
Right. So those are all, that's fine. But when there's a group of 4 or 5, 5 people from GPAC meeting with an organization, it looks bad.
Okay, all right.
Matt?
So we should keep it to one person, you're saying?
1 or 2, I think.
2. All right, but we should
Matt,
make
just
sure
to-
2 is the limit then.
I don't know what the limit is.
Well, we
Just
should
to-
have because it could be 3 or it could be 4.
2 is probably not a bad idea.
As long as it's not a quorum, but what? Okay, but this was not a quorum, but it looked bad. So 4 would have been better, or 3, or.
Carol, I want us to move along here because it's
Okay.
late and I've got other hands up.
All right, but we
I'm
should,
gonna take Christine.
decide something.
Yeah,
We have 4 years to go.
yeah. Christina and Chris.
So I just want some clarity on this. So so it is not a violation of the Brown Act if we have less than a quorum? Is it a violation of the Brown Act if we have this, if it was with other people who are regular public also at that meeting? Is that, when does it become a violation if we have 5 members? Which is not a majority. So, I guess I don't understand, because I thought the rule was 5 or 6 would be a quorum, right? So we're not allowed to do that. But is there any other conditions on that as well that would constitute a Brown violation?
So it's when you're meeting with a quorum, so in this case 6, and you're talking about items that are in the purview of your committee. And so it could be with individual person, if there are 5 GPAC members, 6 GPAC members there, and an individual person, that also would be a violation. It doesn't, it's the quorum itself that matters. And I think Greg has something to add potentially.
So yes, that is one, and I think the primary example of a violation of the Brown Act is a quorum of a body having a meeting that is not in public. Another violation is, Sarah described, serial communications, which then constitute a quorum. So A to B, B to C, C to D, etc. So once you start talking about items in the purview in that fashion, that becomes a potential violation of the Brown Act. And similarly, in a hub and spoke circumstance where A talks to staff and staff talks to B and communicates what A. And so it doesn't matter how the communication happens, but if it is a majority of the body and there's an exchange of thoughts, ideas, policies around a given topic in the purview, that's all potentially a violation of the Brown Act. And I think what what staff has always been sensitive to, and I think the council and commissions as well, is that there's the kind of bright line letter of the law, but then there's also the perception about certain things. And we've always, if strived is a word, striven, we've always tried to achieve a big distance between sort of our activities and what could even be perceived as a potential violation of the Brown Act. And, we go above and beyond in terms of public notification. And so we take these things very seriously. And that's kind of at the staff level. And certainly I think that is something that the council supports as well. So there's the letter of the law, and then there's kind of the gray areas around it. And so I think it just goes to the spirit of transparency, which is we hold in high regard. So hope that answers the question.
Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yes, the invitation that I got, it said nothing about Save Lafayette. It was from Susan Candell, and it was about spreadsheets that Colin had that he wanted to go over. So I did not know who was on the distribution list. I came into the meeting. You and I actually last year, as you said earlier, spent a lot of time going through Colin's spreadsheets. And there was some very good information there. So I figured it was probably going to be helpful for me to go to that meeting. If I knew that we were, and I did the calculation in my head, if we were down to 10 and there were 5 of us there, that it was probably going to be okay. But I will not do that again. If I get onto a meeting and there are, if it's even close to being a quorum, I'm not interested in doing that. Because I don't want this, I don't want any hint of distrust or, offline activities, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want any of that for this committee. That's the last thing we should be focusing on.
Right.
Talk about, time left.
Yeah. Chris, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that's the right note to strike here. For me, whether it's someone from Inclusive Lafayette or Save Lafayette, if someone wants to talk to me, I'll talk to them. And it's as much, there's the Brown Act, and then there's the perception side, Chris, I think as you raised it, and touched on. I think we just need to be sensitive to that. Because there are a lot of atmospherics out there. I think we just want to be, steering this as straight down the middle as we can. Because as we've seen, people may make us certain assumptions about things which aren't necessarily true, but we don't want to sort of give any credence to any of that. Okay. Well, with that, it's 9 o'clock. We may have set another record for meetings unless there's any other. Namratha, you've got your hand up, please.
Sorry, one last thing. So I know today's discussion got a little bit intense, and I just wanted to take a moment, I guess, to kind of recommit to all of us being respectful and open-minded during our discussions. And I also wanted to take a moment to appreciate our phenomenal staff and other advisors that we have who have really helped us in this process. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice, thank you. Very nice.
I think that's a great note to end this on. A little moment of grace. Thank you, Namratha. We have a lot of work to do, folks. It's not going to be easy. I think I called it the hill to climb when we had the joint session. It's really a cliff. But the goal is to get this through, do the best job we can with this, try to get as much public input as we can, and do the best work we can do possibly for the city and the community we are sort of serving. And with that, I think it's time to call it quits. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you very much, Jim.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Jim.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.